Chapter 94. The first thing that fell was the leader's arm, followed by his legs and finally his head. In an instant, only his body was left hanging in the air by the vines. Xiaoqing turned around and smiled embarrassedly. You were a little slow, so I was a little faster. I'm sorry. Yan Pingshan silently swallowed his next words and said flatteringly, Good job. He just wanted to ask if there was a place to grow crops in the town. Xiaoqing was too cruel. Fortunately, there were still many small fries left, so he could ask them one by one. Your leaders are all dead. Surrender. Yen Ruru waved her long whip, which was covered with a layer of dark flame. Whoever it landed on would have their skin and flesh burnt and their bones broken. Those small fries were about to surrender, but Xiaoqing shouted, Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Yen Ruru looked at Xiaoqing doubtfully. After all, it was a little cruel to kill them all. After all, although the leader was very bad, some of his subordinates might have been coerced. Xiaoqing smiled coldly and said, Ask them. Which one of them hasn't eaten human flesh? Which one of them hasn't killed? Didn't you hear that sentence? Kill all the men and capture all the women alive. They have already harmed so many people. Even if they were unwilling at the beginning now, I'm afraid they like this kind of life more than anyone else. They only need to plunder and kill to live a good life. Yen Ruru also reacted and waved her hand. Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Perhaps Xiaoqing's method of dealing with them was very rough, but she was right. These people had long fallen. Even if they were let go, they would still find another place to continue robbing. After tasting the pleasure of reaping without sowing, they could not change. Instead of letting them continue to harm others, it was better to kill them all and take it as a good thing. Soon those small fries were almost all killed, leaving only one who looked a little younger. Yenru kicked him and said, Lead the way for us later. We'll go to your lair, understand? I know. The young man with multicolored hair said in a trembling voice. At this time, those paranormals who had been temporarily paralyzed had not recovered, because Xiaoqing and the others had ended the battle too quickly. Yen Ruru led her people to clean up the battlefield. The big pit dug by the robbers was very useful. After all the corpses were dug out, they were thrown into the big pit. Finally, the Earth paranormals worked together to fill up the big pit. When they buried the corpses, they cried. The leader's body was fine. Although his body was torn apart, it was still whole. But the second leader's body was pitiful. Except for his head, even his internal organs were broken into pieces. The cleaners had no choice but to find a shovel and shovel them into the pit. While they were cleaning up, the young captive asked softly, Aren't you going to leave the corpses behind? It's a pity to bury so much meat. Yen Ruru patted Xiaoqing on the shoulder. You're right. Now I even feel that it's too merciful to just kill them. When we get to their nest later, I'm sure you can't wait to dig them all out and cut them into pieces, Xiaoqing said expressionlessly. After cleaning up, except for the mottled blood on the ground, there was nothing else to prove that a big battle had just taken place here. At this time, those paranormals gradually recovered. Xiaoqing and the others got in the car and went to their nest under the guidance of the young captive. Chapter 95. After passing the mountain pass, they would arrive at the town not far away. Their base was located between the town and the mountain. They had built their base well, surrounded by thick wooden fences. Inside the base should be the houses on the edge of the town, which had been occupied by them. When the off-road vehicles stopped outside, some people who stayed behind secretly looked out. Yen Ruru escorted the young captive out of the vehicle, followed by a large number of people. Those who stayed behind were immediately frightened. Break in. Xiaoqing was the first to make a move. Vines flew out in an instant and tore apart the guardrails on both sides. Gu Panpan took the lead and slammed into the guardrails with her body. The iron gate flew out along with half of the guardrails. Xiaoqing led the group of paranormals behind her and rushed in, knocking down the few paranormals who stayed behind at the gate in minutes. I'll bring some people over to take a look and ransack their warehouse. Yen Pingshan rubbed his palms and was very happy. Xiaoqing and Yen Ruru took some people to search for survivors. Fortunately, this small stronghold was not big, so the search was very fast. Several paranormals who hid in the stronghold were soon found, along with a group of women. It was a group of women with abnormal mental states. They were all dressed in rags and skinny. 6 or 7 out of 10 of them had lifeless eyes. Some of them even began to take off their clothes when they saw that someone was coming. Their bodies were covered with scars of all kinds. It was a ghastly sight. Some of the women's bodies had been ravaged to the point that it was unbearable to look at. Yen Ruru suddenly understood why Xiaoqing had told her that once they reached this place, she would not be able to resist pulling out the corpses from the pit and shredding them into pieces. Because she really wanted to do that now. In the post-apocalyptic world, women were originally a vulnerable group, not to mention encountering such a group of beasts. Yen Ruru turned her head away, tears coming out. She was actually a very emotional woman. Seeing them in such a miserable state, she was about to go crazy from anger. She was almost unable to bear it. The group of male paranormals consciously went out, leaving Xiaoqing and the other women to dress these women. Not all of the women were crazy. Some of them were still sane. One of the women asked tentatively, "Were you also captured?" Xiaoqing shook her head. "You are free now. We have killed all the bandits here. No one will force you anymore." All of a sudden, those women seemed to have gone crazy as they pounced on a woman in the corner. That woman was wearing a very beautiful dress. The hem of her dress had traces of being deliberately torn and smeared with dirt. The woman screamed, "What are you doing?" She was pinned down in the middle by a group of crazy women, and screams immediately rang out. These women were all ordinary people, and they only knew how to scratch and bite. However, each of them wanted to eat her up, and they viciously tore off piece after piece of meat. Soon the ground was covered with blood, and so were their bodies. They really looked like a group of lunatics. That woman was bitten to death. When she died, there was no intact part of her body. The woman who spoke first wiped the blood from her mouth and spat. "We were all captured and humiliated. But this woman clung onto that bastard and helped him torture us. Several of our sisters were tortured to death just like that. Among them were 2 children, one 13 years old and the other 16 years old. I'd like to see what color her heart is. No matter what happened, it's over now. Don't be sad." Yen Ruru didn't know how to comfort them. She just wiped her tears and said, "Anyway, you are free now." The woman's eyes lit up and then dimmed. She held her legs and began to cry. Her crying infected the other women, and soon they all cried together. Xiaoqing waited patiently for them to stop crying. When they slowly sobbed, she said softly, "There is a Zhongbei survivor base in front of us, and there is a survivor base in S City behind us. There are also some small bases nearby, but they are not as safe as the big ones. You can consider where to settle down." Chapter 96. The few sensible girls looked at each other, but no one said anything in the end. No matter which base they went to, they had to walk a long way. Besides, they were a group of girls, so it was not safe for them to go anywhere. There was no guarantee in a small base. It was inevitable that some people would see them as girls and do something bad to them, or even imprison them. How much better would that situation be than now? If they went to a big base, it would be much safer. However, they were all weak girls, ordinary people, and some of them were not sane. It was such a long way to go to a big base. How many of them could reach there alive? Women who could live until now without going crazy were all very smart and had high endurance. Regarding the above conclusion, everyone was very clear, but no one said anything. Because they all knew that no one had any obligation to take a group of useless women with them. In particular, there were several girls who had already gone crazy. They would only be a burden. Smart people would not choose to take them with them. Yen Ruru looked at Xiaoqing with some embarrassment. She also knew this, so even if she sympathized with these women, she did not say that she would take them with her. If they were near S City base, and there were only her own team of paranormals, she would dare to say that. However, she was now on a mission. Yen Pingshan was her employer, and she was just a mercenary. Therefore, she could not make this decision. Xiaoqing did not say anything. She was silent for a long time, and then said to Yen Ruru, "Take them out and find Yen Pingshan." This kind of hot potato was better left to Yen Pingshan. After all, Yen Pingshan was the employer, so it was better to let him make the decision. Yen Ruru nodded and breathed a sigh of relief. She put on the girls' clothes and took them out. Yen Pingshan had found the warehouse and was directing people to move things out. There were several captives tied up together beside him. Although a lot of things were moved out, there was no happy expression on his face. Xiaoqing walked over and found that most of the things in the warehouse were corpses. The corpses had been cleaned clean, their internal organs had been removed, and their heads had been cut off. After soaking them in salt water, they were split in half from the middle and hung on hooks like slaughtered pigs and dogs. There were at least 50 to 60 corpses hanging in the left and right rows. Some of them were tall and seemed to be adult men. Some of them were short and were probably underage. It was no wonder that Yan Pingshan's expression was so ugly. Anyone who saw such a tragedy would have an ugly expression. When the women saw the captives beside Yan Pingshan, they clenched their teeth and wanted to pounce on them. But since Xiaoqing and the others didn't say anything, they didn't dare to do anything rashly. However, a woman who looked to be in her 30s and had a great figure pounced on them. Her hair was disheveled. After pouncing on them, she bit one of them on the throat. Everyone heard a clear scream and the sound of blood pouring down her throat. Gulp gulp. The other woman hurriedly said, "Please don't be angry." Her sister was still pregnant when she was raped by this man. After that, the man even cut out the child in her dead sister's belly just to see the gender. Then he fed the child to wild dogs. From that day on she went crazy. Xiaoqing wasn't angry at all. She used vines to pull the captives who were still alive out one by one and asked the women, "Live or die?" The captives kept begging for mercy and repenting, but the women were very determined. This kind of beast, it's too easy for them to die. Chapter 97. Xiaoqing dismembered the captives one by one in front of these women, but no one thought that she was cruel. After seeing everything in this stronghold, everyone felt that they could not atone for their sins even if they died 10,000 times. After moving out the supplies and burying the pickled corpses, Yan Pingshan said fiercely, "I must burn this place to vent my hatred. Let's deal with them first." Xiaoqing briefly explained the origin of these women, and then threw the most important question to Yan Pingshan. "Now they have nowhere to go. You are the employer. What do you think we should do?" Yan Pingshan stared and was a little confused. Xiaoqing really gave him a difficult problem. No matter how he dealt with these women, there would be problems. If he left them to their own devices, he would not be able to live with his conscience. If he brought them along, the danger along the way would be a lot greater. Moreover, if they really encountered an accident, these women would only be a burden. Meng Shen said, "I suggest that we bring them along. What do you think of the two captains? Although we are the employer, your opinions are also very important." "I have no opinion," Yin Ruru hurriedly said. Xiaoqing glanced at the women and changed her view of Meng Shen. She said lightly, "If we bring you along, you will be responsible for cooking and cleaning. You don't have any opinion, right?" The women were very surprised and nodded. How could they have any opinion? They were even very grateful to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing made them feel that they were still somewhat useful. "Then let's bring them. Anyway, there are only 6 women. Sister Yen can bring 3 and I can bring 3. Xiaoqing said calmly, "Have you moved everything out? If you have, let's go." "Okay." Yin Pingshan also nodded and the group of people left. Before leaving, Yin Ruru set a fire. They only left after seeing this evil place turn into ashes with their own eyes. The women secretly wiped away their tears. They had suffered too much in this place. They had lost all their loved ones and in the end they had nothing left. Xiaoqing found some clothes in her space and asked them to change out of the shabby clothes that couldn't cover their bodies. Xiaotong also took some medicine for treating wounds. When she heard Xiaotong's thanks, she blushed. After taking in these women, they entered the town. It was said that these women were usually asked to go to the town's vegetable garden with a few ordinary people, so they were very familiar with the way to the vegetable garden. Yin Pingshan and his men picked all the vegetables that had grown. Although they had harvested a lot and could have a fresh lunch in a while, no one felt happy. Everything that they had seen today was too heavy for them to be happy. The women in the team were very nervous. They rushed to do everything such as cooking. Xiaoqing never stopped them, because she knew that doing these things would make them feel more at ease. "Leave the cooking to Hanqing. He is very good at cooking. You have been tired for a day. Take a rest." Xiaoqing ordered the vines to retract their thorns and arrange them into the shape of a bench. Sitting on the bench was exceptionally elastic, and it was cool enough not to hurt one's butt. Dai and the others sat at the side waiting for the meal. The three women were very embarrassed and sat down after setting the table. Xiaoqing saw that they were nervous and didn't say anything. They couldn't relax for a while. "Auntie, some candy." Little Baozi walked with his short legs and distributed the candy to the women. He blinked his big eyes and was so cute. The three women were at a loss as to what to do as they held the candy. One of them was the woman who had pounced on the captive and bitten his throat. She had been so fierce before, and her eyes were bloodshot. She had bitten a captive's throat in a frenzy, but now she was like a child. She was at a loss as to what to do as she held the candy. In the end, she gently patted Little Bun's head. Chapter 98. Her movements were very gentle and careful. It was as if she would hurt the little bun if she used too much force. Another woman who was sane couldn't help but ask, "Is this your child? He's so cute." "You don't have to call me yours. Just call me by my name. My name is Xiaoqing." Xiaoqing whispered, "This is my son." "What's his name?" The woman was a little embarrassed. "He's really cute. I like him very much. My name is Xiangru. This is Zhang Xiaofan. This is Tao Jingjing." Xiaoqing was stunned. She just realized that she had been calling the little bun baby all the time. She hadn't given the little bun a name yet. Naming was a big deal. It needed to be carefully considered and pondered. Of course, for a person who was bad at naming was as painful as fighting a level 4 zombie alone. "Actually, I haven't given him a name yet." Xiaoqing couldn't bring herself to say it. Finally, she said vaguely, "His nickname is Bao Bao. You can call him Bao Bao." "Bao Bao?" Xiangru asked carefully, "Can I kiss him?" Before Xiaoqing said anything, the little bun took the initiative and kissed Xiangru. Xiangru held her face and was very happy. Xiaoqing couldn't help but smile. She picked up the little bun and turned her face to the little bun. The little bun came over and kissed her a few times. Xiangru sat on the side and was very envious. After a while, she smiled and said, "It's so happy to have such a little baby by your side." Xiaoqing's eyes were full of tenderness. The little bun was her biggest motivation. Normally, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. With limited ingredients, what Yan Hanqing could cook was also limited. Now that he had an abundance of ingredients, he made 6 dishes and a soup in one go. Although they were all vegetarian dishes, they smelled and looked appetizing. A group of people gathered around to eat, which made Yan Pingshan and the others drool. After all, there was a gap between chefs. The gap between their chefs and Yan Hanqing was like the gap between a beginner who had learned how to cook and a person who had learned how to cook through the system. If there was a comparison, there would be harm. The women didn't dare to fill the bowl with rice. Xiaoqing filled the bowl with rice and handed it to them. She also put some food into their bowls. "There are a lot of dishes. Help yourselves. Only when you are full will you have the strength to clean up the dishes." She had eaten very little, and she had forced herself to eat. She would have to spit it out later. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to fool others, she wouldn't have eaten a single bite. After lunch, they didn't continue to move forward. Instead, they stayed in the town to rest temporarily. At least the town had been cleaned up, and there were few zombies. They found a 3-story building along the street, and could have a good rest for the day. After all, it was not only their bodies that were tired, but also their minds that were on high alert. If they could rest, it would be good for the rest of the journey. Xiaoqing went back to her room after lunch. Then Xiaoqing and Dai surrounded the trash can and vomited for a while. After vomiting, they took Little Bun and began to absorb a pile of crystal stones. Little Bun could absorb some high-calorie and nutritious things, but they couldn't eat raw food, let alone flesh and blood. They could only use crystal stones to maintain their strength. They spent the whole day and night in their room absorbing crystal stones. They only showed their faces during lunch. The next morning, Xiaoqing didn't need much sleep, so she got up early. But when she got up, the 3 women were already packing their things. Xiaoqing couldn't help but frown and went downstairs. "It's only 5 o'clock. I'm sorry, did we wake you up?" Xiangru said with some panic. Xiaoqing shook her head and said to them, "What you need to do is to have a good rest. and then you will have the energy to hurry on the road. I don't need you to be too diligent, as long as you don't drag us down." Her words were not pleasant to hear, and her voice was very cold. Xiangru whispered, "You are a good person." Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment. No one had ever given her a good person card. Her teammates said that she was a trustworthy and dependable person, and people couldn't help but regard her as the backbone. Her enemies said that she was cruel and ruthless, and was a lone wolf. People who didn't know her said that she was cold and unapproachable. Xiangru was the first person to say that she was a good person. She couldn't help but turn her head. Her face was still expressionless, but her earlobes were slightly red. "How am I a good person? Haven't you seen how I kill people? You are really a good person." Xiangru couldn't help but raise her voice and said with some eagerness, "Although you look cold on the surface, you are more considerate than those who comfort us with warm words, and you are very hot-blooded and righteous. You are a very, very good person." Xiaoqing couldn't help but sneer. "You are so sleepy that you are hallucinating. Go to sleep and we will be on the road in a while." Xiangru looked at Xiaoqing's back as she left, pulled the two sisters who were not very normal and whispered, "Really, thank you very much." Xiaoqing couldn't help but laugh. How did she act like a good person? After she killed those bandits, even the people of the Blaze team and Yan Pingshan's side would be afraid of her, right? They were really naive to think that she was a good person. She was clearly a cold-blooded, ruthless person who always thought of herself. How could she give others the illusion that she was a good person? As soon as Xiaoqing went out, she saw Meng Shun sitting at the door wiping a dagger. His eyes were very serious, as if he was actually in a laboratory doing the kind of experiment that couldn't go wrong. This attitude towards weapons once again pleased Xiaoqing, and made Xiaoqing's impression of Meng Shun a little better. Chapter 99. It's a beautiful dagger. Meng Shun was stunned for a moment. He probably didn't expect Xiaoqing to take the initiative to talk to him. He said shyly, "A very important person gave it to me. Someone you like? Can I have a look?" Xiaoqing had an indescribable love for cold weapons. She had once bought a cabinet to store short weapons. It was filled with all kinds of military knives, bayonets, daggers, and short swords. Meng Shun hesitated for a moment, then handed the dagger to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing held the dagger and looked at it carefully. This was a dagger used to kill people. Ordinary ornamental daggers wouldn't be sharpened. Although the daggers sold privately could be sharpened, they weren't standard. As for this single-edged dagger, although the back and hilt of the dagger were decorated with gorgeous and ancient patterns, it was easy for people to mistake it as an ornamental dagger. However, from the blade to the tip it was prepared to kill people. Xiaoqing's favorite dagger was the double-edged plum blossom dagger. There was a crescent blade at the grip, beautiful and sharp. Most importantly, the plum blossom dagger was the most suitable weapon for women. However, the first dagger she received was a single-edged dagger. It was given to her by her instructor. At that time she wasn't used to using bayonets, so she relied on this dagger when she went out on missions. However, during one mission she was seriously injured and lost the dagger. No matter how Xiaoqing looked at it, she felt that the dagger looked very familiar. It looked very much like the first dagger she had thrown away. Just as she was about to take a closer look, Meng Shun whispered, Have you finished looking at it?" Xiaoqing glanced at Meng Shun, who looked as if she would snatch the dagger away from him. She handed the dagger to him and asked casually, "Where did you get this dagger? It's pretty." "Someone gave it to me." Meng Shun hesitated for a moment, then said. He took the dagger, carefully wiped it with a soft cloth, and finally put it into the scabbard. "Is that so?" Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She just faintly said, "I think this dagger looks very familiar. It seems like I've seen it a long time ago." Meng Shun's eyes immediately lit up. He quickly asked, "You've seen it? Who was using it? Can you still find her?" Xiaoqing quickly analyzed Meng Shun's words. Finally, she said tentatively, "When I saw it, the owner of this dagger was called Blue Phoenix." "Yes, that's her." Meng Shun was so surprised that his cheeks were flushed red. There was no trace of his previous indifference. "Where is she now? Can you still find her?" Xiaoqing didn't answer his question. Instead she asked, "How do you know her? How did this dagger end up in your hands?" Meng Shun was a little hesitant. After a while, he looked like he was going to cut off all means of retreat and said, "Actually, I don't know her. I've only seen her once, and she was wearing a gas mask. At that time I was a researcher in charge of researching drugs. We developed an effective anti-cancer drug, but before we could submit the research results, they were stolen by a spy." Thinking of the past, Meng Shun's expression became a little cold. Because of some accident, the research institute was blown up, and I was crushed under a stone slab. It was her. Blue Phoenix saved me. She left the dagger for me to protect myself. When he finished speaking, his cold expression was instantly melted by tenderness. Xiaoqing couldn't help but shiver. At that time the situation was urgent. Xiaoqing didn't have time to send Meng Shun out. She could only call for help. Then she got Meng Shun's leg out from under the stone slab. After that, she found a place to put him down and chased after the spy. At that time she left a dagger for Meng Shun. She wanted to take it back after the incident. However, she was seriously injured and laid in the hospital for 3 months. She broke 3 ribs and had a comminuted fracture in one of her legs. Other minor injuries were needless to say. After she recovered, she was discharged from the army. Chapter 100. In the end he didn't get the dagger back. Xiaoqing wasn't going to tell Meng Shun that she was Blue Phoenix. She didn't want to bring up the past again. Looking at Meng Shun's expectant eyes, Xiaoqing originally wanted to say that Blue Phoenix was already dead. However, in the end she couldn't help but change her words. She was injured. After recovering, her body couldn't keep up with the intensity of the mission. So she retired from the army. I heard that she transferred to work and went home to marry and have children. Meng Shun opened his mouth, but no words came out. He lowered his head slightly, unable to hide the disappointment on his face. After a long time he said, "I'm relieved that she's doing well. Originally, I wanted to return the dagger to her. She doesn't need it anymore." Xiaoqing stood up. "I'll go see if dinner is ready." Meng Shun nodded his head, tightly gripping the dagger. There were some things that he couldn't forget. Every night he would dream of that white hand gently pulling him up. Even in the smoke-filled space he could smell the faint fragrance on her body. It was very faint. He had tried to find out the people who participated in that mission several times. However, Xiaoqing was in a secret unit, so she couldn't reveal any information. The only thing Meng Shun knew was that she was called Blue Phoenix. Then, after a very long time, just when he thought he would never be able to find her again or hear any news about her, Xiaoqing told him that the person of his dreams had retired from the army and returned home to get married. In the end it was just an illusory one-sided love. Perhaps even until her death, Blue Phoenix wouldn't know that there was someone who fell in love with her at first sight. Seeing that Xiaoqing was about to walk up the stairs, Meng Shun couldn't help but ask, "What's her real name?" Xiaoqing paused, shook her head and went upstairs. Yan Hanqing came out of the kitchen wearing an apron. The apron was provided by Xiaoqing. It was a pink floral apron which looked very girlish. In the beginning, Yan Hanqing was still a little embarrassed, but now he could calmly wear an apron and cook. "I've boiled fresh milk for the baby. Do you want some sugar?" Yan Hanqing asked in a low voice. Xiaoqing thought for a while and answered according to little Baozi's preference, "A spoonful of sugar. He won't be able to digest any more than that and will spit it out in the end." Yan Hanqing nodded and turned around to add more sugar. His back was very broad, and his back was as solid as a mountain, filled with a sense of security. Now he was wearing a pink apron. It looked a little funny, but it made Xiaoqing feel warm and at ease. For someone like her, who was used to going through life and death situations and hovering on the edge of death, what she yearned for the most was warmth and a sense of security. So when Lin Qifan showered her with gentleness, she fell for him so quickly. At that time, Xiaoqing felt that she had found someone to rely on for the rest of her life. She had found a man who was willing to be her solid support. Later, she found out that there was a kind of man who wore a gentle coat and was used to sweet-talking. He threw his conscience out of the window. Xiaoqing leaned against the door frame and sighed. "If only the person I met in the beginning was you. How good would that be?" Yan Hanqing's hand couldn't help but tremble, and he added half a spoonful of sugar. He silently stirred the milk with a spoon to prevent it from spilling out. When it was almost done, he turned off the fire and brought the pot of milk down. "I'll go wake the baby up." Xiaoqing didn't say anything else and returned to her room. Naturally, she couldn't see how gentle Yan Hanqing's gaze was when he looked at her. After waking little Baozi up and drinking the milk, Xiaoqing wiped little Baozi's milk beard clean before carrying him out for a walk. Chapter 101. Those who had just woken up, those who were washing up, and those who were going downstairs all heard the alarm. Two of them hurriedly ran downstairs without pulling up their pants. As soon as they came downstairs, they saw Yen Ruru standing in the hall with a bad look. She said to them, "Go out and gather." As a representative of those who hadn't pulled up their pants yet, Yen Pingshan ran downstairs while tying his belt. When he saw Yen Ruru, he asked, "What happened? Is it a zombie riot?" "We'll know when we get to the door." Yen Ruru waved her hand. "Everyone, gather at the entrance. Leader Yen, call your men down as well." Okay. Although they didn't know what happened, it was definitely not a zombie riot. Otherwise, Yen Ruru wouldn't be so calm. Yen Pingshan breathed a sigh of relief. He tied his belt and called the others down. Mengshen was much calmer than him. At least his clothes were neat. When they arrived at the door, they found Xiaoqing standing there. Her body was surrounded by dancing vines. One of the vines was binding a pig's face that had been beaten so badly that even his mother couldn't recognize him. When everyone was there, Xiaoqing asked, "Who was patrolling last night?" Two young men stood up. One was from Yen Pingshan's side, and the other was from Yen Ruru's side. She gave each of them a whip without saying a word. They all whipped their legs. The legs of their pants were torn, revealing their red and swollen skin. "Were you sleeping when you patrolled last night? Someone sneaked into those girls' rooms and raped them. Didn't you find out?" Xiaoqing didn't seem to have any big emotional fluctuations. Her voice was very calm, but it made them tremble with fear. Suddenly being beaten, the two who were still angry immediately felt ashamed and stopped talking. It was their fault. What's more, they did slack off last night. They thought that there wouldn't be any danger in this small town, as the robbers had cleaned up the surroundings. So they slacked off for a while. They didn't expect that the zombies didn't come, but there was a traitor. After slapping the two of them, Xiaoqing didn't intend to do anything else to them. She just called out the other 6 women. When the 6 women stood beside her, Xiaoqing said slowly, "When you decided to take them in, was it a unanimous decision? Speak." "Yes." Yen Pingshan and Yen Ruru took the lead, and the others naturally followed. Xiaoqing continued to ask, "At that time, I should have said that if we took them in and took them to the Zhongbei superpower base, they wouldn't eat. They would help with some basic work such as cooking and cleaning. At that time, I thought that you already knew clearly that they were our companions." Xiaoqing paused for a moment, swept her gaze around, and then said, "However, I never imagined that someone would actually do something worse than a beast." He snuck into their room in the middle of the night and did such a thing to a few women who had suffered all kinds of humiliation and suffering to the point of being delirious. "Now that he is in my hands, I want to hear your opinions." The people below looked at each other. The girls were all filled with righteous indignation and wanted to be severely punished. However, there were a few discordant voices that came out. "He has already beaten and scolded. Why don't we punish him by deducting his reward for this trip? We are all brothers, so we have to consider our relationship." "That's right. He didn't do anything too excessive. At worst, he should apologize to these women and give them some compensation. It's normal to be impulsive after holding it in for so long. Men are all like this. It's not a big mistake. Just punish him." Chapter 102. The women lowered their heads, their bodies trembling, especially when someone proposed to compensate them, as if they were prostitutes. Xiaoqing dragged her voice and said, "Oh, is that what you all think?" When those people saw that Xiaoqing was not angry, they became a lot bolder and said, "Just give some compensation. At most, we can ask him to take out all his reward for this trip to compensate these women. With his reward for this trip, it won't be a problem for him to find dozens or hundreds of prostitutes." Before he finished, he was slapped by Yen Ruru. "What you just said, repeat it." That person instantly became silent, covered his face and said submissively, "Sister Yen, my mouth is cheap, please don't be angry." Yen Ruru could not wait to give him another kick to wake him up. Xiaoqing smiled slightly and raised her voice. "This is the decision you made? This is the way you decided to deal with it?" The few people who were very active just now did not dare to speak. The remaining few girls said angrily, "Sister Xiao, don't be soft-hearted. Punish him severely." Xiaoqing faintly said, "I really feel ashamed for you people. It turns out that the one who was humiliated wasn't your wife or daughter. If it was your wife or daughter who was humiliated like this, would you still say such things? You can't say it like that." Before one of them could say anything, he was kicked to the ground by Yen Ruru. Yen Ruru was completely angry. "Is that so? Then I will go back and let you feel the feeling of your wife being defiled. How about that?" Xiaoqing was not moved at all. She knew the nature of these people, so she was not disappointed. The arrival of the apocalypse had magnified many people's desires and indulged many people's temper. No matter what these people were like under other people's hands, in front of her, they had better be obedient. She was different from Meng Shun, Yen Pingshan, and Yen Ruru. She was ruthless enough to such people. Today, even if it was her partner who did such a thing, she would not tolerate it, let alone such a thing. Those who think that he should be given a lighter punishment can take a step forward. You can rest assured that even if you stand out, I will not retaliate against you." Xiaoqing said indifferently, "No matter what, at least you can rest assured of my reputation." There were whispers below. Some people who had a good relationship with this person braced themselves and stood out. When no one else stepped forward, Xiaoqing nodded. "I understand your opinions. Next, it's my way of dealing with it. If you have any opinions about my way of dealing with it, you can speak up." As soon as her voice fell, one person opened his mouth to speak, but before he could speak, he saw that the culprit who was hanging at the side was suddenly entangled by a group of vines. In only a second, the group of vines was like a meat grinder, turning a living person into minced meat. Chapter 103. The dead man had been her brother, and had ceased to be her brother the moment he had done that disgraceful deed. Yen Ruru would feel heartache, but she would not hate Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing took back the vines and looked lazily at the people who were vomiting and the pile of minced meat on the ground. She said softly, "If you have any opinions, remember to tell me. If you don't tell me, how will I know if you have any opinions? From now on, those with impure thoughts and dark thoughts who want to do something, you better hold back. You can go back and find whatever you want to vent. Stay here and be good. After all, I don't mind killing a few more people." At this moment, everyone looked at Xiaoqing in a completely different way. Other than fear, there was only fear. She was powerful, and her methods were ruthless. In the future, no one would dare to offend her. At this moment, they all understood one thing. They could be presumptuous in front of Yen Ruru because of Yen Ruru's loyalty. She would not do anything to them, so they were spoiled. They could be presumptuous in front of Yen Pingshan because Yen Pingshan was tolerant and gentle, so they were not afraid. However, they could not be presumptuous in front of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing would not spoil any of them. In front of Xiaoqing, they only needed to be honest, obedient, and do what they should do. If there were some things that should not be done or could not be done, then they should not do it. Once they did it, the pile of minced meat under Xiaoqing's feet would be their end. Yen Ruru could not protect them, and neither could Yen Pingshan. Xiaoqing would not care about anyone's opinion. "All right, since no one has any objections, let's end this matter here. Everyone eat or rest. We'll be on our way soon." Xiaoqing flicked the dust off her jacket. Xiangru took the initiative to find some tools to clean up the blood and flesh on the ground. She was very grateful to Xiaoqing. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Xiaoqing was very terrible, like a devil. In her eyes, Xiaoqing was the best one. Only Xiaoqing would stand up for these weak women who had no power and no use. Xiaoqing was cruel and killed people without blinking. So what? The men standing below, they were not so cruel, but what did they do? Gossiping and gossiping, using careless words to repeatedly tear their wounds open. Only Xiaoqing was willing to frighten so many paranormals for them. In Xiaoqing's eyes, they were human beings who needed to be respected and treated equally. There was no pity or sympathy in Xiaoqing's eyes. She just treated them like the most ordinary people, which made the women feel particularly at ease. The other 3 women were not willing to go back to Yenruru's side, but later they were persuaded by Xiangru. After all, after this incident, no one dared to bully Yenruru's people anymore. If all of them were on Shaoqing's side, Shaoqing would be under a lot of pressure. Chapter 104. It would be strange if Shaoqing didn't notice it after seeing it so many times. She didn't open her eyes and asked in a low voice, "Hanqing, do you also think I'm too cruel and extreme?" Yan Hanqing shook his head. Shaoqing's methods were indeed violent, but he didn't think Shaoqing was wrong. He didn't even think that Shaoqing's methods were too extreme. If he was the one doing it, he would also choose to kill the man, although he might use a more efficient method. But the result would be the same. After shaking his head, Yan Hanqing reacted. Shaoqing's eyes were closed, so she couldn't see his movements. She said scum deserved to die. Shaoqing, who was originally in a bad mood, was suddenly amused. She chuckled and said, "Can't you say more? Don't be angry. If it were me, I would also kill." Yan Hanqing thought for a while and said seriously. Finally, he added, "It's not comforting." "I know." Shaoqing knew that the way she dealt with things was very violent, extreme, and even perverted, but she didn't want to change. In her eyes, there were 3 kinds of men in this world that couldn't be forgiven. The first was those who committed that kind of violence to women. The second was those who played with women's feelings. The third was those who committed domestic violence. Unfortunately, not only did that man hit the first one, but he also did that kind of thing to a woman who had suffered psychological and physical trauma. She really couldn't stand it. In fact, she had already suppressed her anger towards those who made sarcastic remarks. Otherwise, today's matter wouldn't have been so simple. "I think I understand a lot of things. For example, in this apocalyptic world, strength is really the most important thing. Without strength, you can only be bullied. With strength, you can at least protect the people you want to protect." Shaoqing yawned, and her mood was much better. "Just like me, I think I'm upholding justice today, but some people think I'm very cruel. But even if my methods are cruel, no one dares to say anything because I have strength. Sleepy? If you're tired, you can sleep a little longer. Nothing should happen. I'll wake you up when it's time to rest." Yan Hanqing was silent for a moment and then said. He had experienced the cruelty of the end of the world, so he had to admit that Shaoqing was right. Shaoqing nodded. She hugged little Bun and rested her head on Air Dai's thigh. She was not sleepy, but she felt tired. Shaoqing slept until it was dark. She didn't even get up for lunch. Yan Hanqing and the others all knew that Shaoqing didn't need to eat, so they didn't wake her up. It wasn't until the evening that Shaoqing woke up naturally. Fortunately, the Air Dai wasn't a human. Otherwise, her legs would have been numbed by the pillow or even broken. When Shaoqing got up, everyone was setting up the tents. When they saw Shaoqing, they couldn't help but want to avoid her. It was because Shaoqing had left too much psychological trauma in their hearts this morning. Shaoqing didn't mind. She took little Bun and Air Dai to walk around, and then returned to their tent. Xiangru was helping Yan Hanqing set up the tent. Yan Hanqing skillfully set up the tent. He said that Xiangru was helping him, but in fact she just handed him a few things. After the tent was set up, they began to cook. Shaoqing smacked her lips. She suddenly felt like eating. Although she didn't need to eat at all, and even her sense of taste was weakened a lot, she was still a normal human being. Humans needed to eat. Even after absorbing the crystals, Shaoqing would sometimes have the illusion that she was hungry. So most of the time, even if it was to hide, Shaoqing would still eat a little. Air Dai, let's go hunting. There was a mountain nearby. Although it was only a small mountain, there were definitely wild animals. Shaoqing excitedly brought Air Dai and Guchuan to hunt. Her and Guchuan's superpowers were very suitable for catching prey. One used vines and the other used ice. Air Dai was responsible for catching prey. Soon the two of them caught a few wild rabbits, pheasants, and a mutated wild rabbit. It had red eyes, snow-white fur, and a pair of front teeth. It ran very fast. When the prey was brought back, most of them were slaughtered by Guchuan. Then he skinned them, removed their internal organs, cleaned them, and prepared to cook. Only the buck-toothed rabbit with a pair of long droopy ears escaped. Little Bun carried it away to play. Yes, he carried it away to play. Chapter 105. Gu Panpan watched as Little Bun grabbed the rabbit's ear and swung it around. She felt pain for it, but this rabbit was quite smart. It knew that its life was in Xiaoqing's hands, so even if it was being swung around, it was still very obedient. Xiaoqing originally thought that if it had any strange movements, she would break its teeth, cut its nails, and give it to Little Bun to raise. Or she could just stew it and bring back an obedient animal. Unexpectedly, this rabbit was quite intelligent and behaved very obediently. Xiaoqing decided to let it go for now. Alright, bring your baby rabbit over. Xiaoqing waved her hand. It's time to eat. What do you want to eat? Rabbit leg or chicken leg? Little Bun ran over with his short legs, carrying the rabbit. Mama, it's not called baby rabbit. It's called Yaya. Alright, Yaya. Xiaoqing glanced at the rabbit. Its front teeth were quite long. Her son's naming style was exactly the same as hers. I want chicken leg. Yaya, do you want chicken leg or rabbit leg? Little Bun blinked his eyes and asked the rabbit in his hand very seriously. The rabbit was about to cry. It didn't want chicken leg or rabbit leg. It wanted to eat carrots. It only wanted carrots. It didn't want meat. It didn't want rabbit leg either. But seeing Little Bun's cute question, Xiaoqing's gaze was dark, as if she was considering where to skin it. It immediately lay flat and pretended to be dead. Then it pitifully pointed at the chicken leg with its paw. No matter what, it couldn't eat its own kind, right? Xiaoqing handed Little Bun 2 chicken legs. Little Bun took one and looked at the rabbit worriedly. If he let go, the rabbit would run away. If he didn't let go, he couldn't give the other one to the rabbit. Xiaoqing calmly took out a thin vine. In order to make it look good, she even made a few white flowers bloom on the vine. Then she wrapped the vine around the rabbit's neck like a collar. The other end of the vine wrapped around Little Bun's wrist. Little Bun immediately released his hand happily and took another drumstick to feed the rabbit. The rabbit named Yaya lay on the ground in despair, its belly facing the sky. It allowed Little Bun to stuff the drumstick into its mouth. Its front teeth were sharp, and it could easily chew the drumstick together with the bones before swallowing it. In the beginning, the rabbit refused because it was a vegetarian rabbit. Its favorite food was vegetables and radishes. It could barely accept cabbage, but chicken drumsticks were not in its diet. It wasn't until it was forced to eat a drumstick that it realized that there was a food in this world that radishes couldn't compare to. Thus, the rabbit gnawed off 2 drumsticks, a wing, and a few chicken butts. Then it rolled on the ground as if it hadn't had enough. Of course, this was because it was no longer a normal rabbit. If a normal rabbit ate so much meat, it would have vomited and had diarrhea, half dead. As for a mutated rabbit, its body had evolved in all aspects. Although it was destined to not be able to beat those large mutated animals because of its starting point, eating some meat was a small matter. After feeding the rabbit, Little Bun was very happy. He held the rabbit's hand and ran around. The rabbit, which had just felt that it was living a happy life, was suddenly dragged and rolled around, almost knocking its front teeth out. When Little Bun came back from walking the rabbit's fur was already falling out pitifully. Even Xiaoqing couldn't bear to see it. When it was time to sleep, Little Bun heartlessly abandoned Xiaoqing and insisted on hugging the rabbit to sleep. Xiaoqing was worried that Little Bun would be bitten by the rabbit, so she could only watch from the side all night. Chapter 106. When Little Bun fell asleep, Xiaoqing took the rabbit out of Little Bun's arms. Then she took out a zombie crystal of the lowest level and fed it to the rabbit. The rabbit was originally in a daze when it felt something slide down its throat. Following that, there was an explosion of energy in its body, causing its small body to swell up in an instant. Then soft fur slowly grew out, and shortened but sharper teeth. The rabbit was a little dumbfounded. It jumped on the spot, looking very stupid. Xiaoqing patted its head. Her voice was faint but very gentle. Stay by my son's side obediently. In the future, I will let you continue to upgrade. If you dare to run away or hurt my son, I will turn you into a braised rabbit head. The rabbit couldn't understand human language, But that didn't stop it from understanding Xiaoqing's meaning. It was so scared that it immediately lay down, revealing its snow-white belly to show its submission. Xiaoqing patted its belly. If it wasn't necessary, she wouldn't pull out the rabbit's teeth or cut off its sharp nails. Even if the rabbit was obedient, she would give it some benefits. Who asked her son to like it? And if it was trained well, this little rabbit might even be able to protect her son. It was killing two birds with one stone. The rabbit wasn't stupid. Other animals mutated in their bodies, becoming stronger and stronger, with sharp claws and teeth, increasing movement speed, and many times more strength than before. Only this rabbit was different. It mutated in its brain. Just like adding points in online games, it added all the points to wisdom. Therefore, this weakling rabbit was probably the smartest of all the rabbits. This smart rabbit quickly understood Xiaoqing's idea and was willing to accept it. It was the weakest among the mutated animals. It could be said that it was at the bottom of the food chain. All carnivores could take a bite out of it. It was better to be raised by Xiaoqing. It was safe and could increase its strength. If Little Bun could be gentler to it, that would be even better. Xiaoqing was very satisfied with the rabbit's cooperation. She stuffed the rabbit into Little Bun's arms and fell asleep. Dai naturally reached out and pulled Xiaoqing into his arms. Habit was a terrible thing. Just like in the beginning, Xiaoqing was very reluctant to let Dai sleep in her bed. After Dai pestered her for so long, she was now used to it. Although she couldn't feel the warmth, Xiaoqing still pulled the quilt over her and Dai before falling asleep. In fact, for most of the night, even with her eyes closed, she was still conscious. This was the benefit of this body. It was both a benefit and a disadvantage. Although she didn't need much rest, in the long night, she would recall too many things. In the past, what she recalled the most was that fake scum and the moment when the speeding car hit her. Xiaoqing used to hate everyone. Those passers-by who looked at her indifferently, but no one reached out to help her. If someone had been willing to save her, the child in her stomach might not have died. Little Bun wouldn't have become like this. He would always have a child's body and intelligence. He couldn't eat like a normal person and live like a normal person. Even if he looked like a normal child, he didn't have a heartbeat. Even the little blood in his body was cold. If Little Bun wasn't alive, Xiaoqing might be destroying the world right now. It was probably this experience that made her more extreme and more ruthless than normal people. Chapter 107. Now, in the long night when she was not in the mood to sleep, she was thinking more about the warm days when everyone was together. Xiaoqing changed Yan Hanqing and the others, and Yan Hanqing and the others also changed Xiaoqing. Dai stretched out his hands and feet and tightly imprisoned Xiaoqing in his arms. Xiaoqing sighed and indulged Dai. Ever since Xiaoqing executed that man in front of everyone that day, many people looked at her with fear in their eyes. However, no one dared to bully those women anymore. Xiaoqing did not care about their gazes. She still lived her life as usual, and the journey was relatively smooth. After walking for more than 10 days, they were finally close to the Zhongbei survivor base. We will reach the Zhongbei survivor base in at most 2 days. Yin Pingshen's words were full of suppressed excitement. Once they reached the Zhongbei survivor base, it meant that they were safe and the things they transported back were also safe. We can't relax, there is still a fierce battle ahead. Xiaoqing was not so optimistic. She sat next to the fire and carefully looked at the map, and then pointed to it. In front of us is all plains. Because of the flat terrain, there are many towns, not to mention the small towns. On the way there is a city and we can't go around it. If we choose to go around it, we may have to turn to the northwest, then pass through 2 mountains and then turn back. After passing through Yanjiang, we can bypass this city and reach the Zhongbei survivor base. Mengshen nodded. When we came here, we passed through this city. Almost all of the injured people were injured at that time. The city has not been cleaned up, and there are a lot of zombies. Most of the zombies have evolved and it is very difficult to deal with. So now is not the time to relax. Let's take a break and be alert when the time comes. Yin Ruru also agreed. Many people died when they lost their vigilance, and she did not want her teammates to make such a mistake. After all, this was a fatal mistake. If there is a way to avoid places where there are more zombies, it will be much easier. Yin Pingshan muttered. Xiaoqing didn't speak, and didn't want to be the first bird. She just opened the map and looked carefully. The places with the most zombies were none other than those schools, large shopping malls, large factories, and so on. As long as they avoided these places, they shouldn't encounter too many problems. After all, there were many of them this time. Even if they encountered some small problems, it would be easy to deal with. If they encountered any big problems, it wouldn't be very dangerous in front of so many paranormals. After walking for another half a day, they finally passed through a small town and arrived at the city. This city should have been a very prosperous city, because it was located on the main road, and behind it was the Yen River. Water transportation was very convenient, so the business here should have developed very well. The population of a bustling city was usually denser. Think about S city, then think about the capital. Before the apocalypse, there were traffic jams every day. After the apocalypse, these cities were also the places with the most zombies. Although the Zhongbei survivor base was established in Zhongbei, we have not sent any paranormals to clean up this city. However, we arranged a search and rescue team to search for survivors. After searching for half a month, we brought all the survivors to the Zhongbei survivor base. At that time, our people found that the zombies in this city were evolving very fast. When we rushed to the Zhongbei survivor base in S city, there were already a lot of level 3 zombies. That's why so many people were injured, and now we don't know the situation inside. Yin Pingshan explained carefully. He didn't intend to hide anything. There was no benefit in hiding, and it would hurt everyone. Chapter 108. Xiaoqing could not help but frown. In other words, we will face more unknown dangers. Yin Pingshan nodded and then said, so I mean, if you think it is dangerous, we can choose to take a detour. Although it will take longer, and we have to pass through 2 mountains, the danger should be less than going through the city. Yen Ruru shook his head first. We know the danger in the city, but the danger in the mountains is unknown. Those evolved animals are more dangerous than zombies. My personal suggestion is that we go through the city, at least you have experience in this aspect. The unknown is always more terrible than the known. I also suggest going through the city. As soon as Yen Ruru spoke, Yin Pingshan's team leader also spoke. Meng Shen did not make a decision rashly, but asked Xiaoqing, what do you think? I have no opinion. Xiaoqing said perfunctorily, and then began to study the map. In fact, she personally preferred to take a detour, but Yen Ruru and Yin Pingshan's attitude was very clear. She did not want to say her opinion and put them in a dilemma. Anyway, no matter which way they went, the danger would not be small. The apocalypse was like this. For most people, the safest place was probably the survivor base. Leaving the survivor base, the outside world was full of danger. From the apocalypse until now, the number of human beings had decreased by 2/3. Most of them had become zombies, and some of them had died in the hands of their own people. In other words, the number of zombies was much higher than that of humans. It had to be said that this was a very sad conclusion. Moreover, the number of humans was still slowly decreasing. After all, hiding in the survivor base was not completely safe, and they had to go out regularly to find food, fuel, and clean up the zombies near the base. Especially ordinary people, the casualty rate of ordinary people in the apocalypse was particularly high. Zombies liked to eat them, and paranormals felt that they were superior and could humiliate them. In short, ordinary people were the biggest vulnerable group in the apocalypse, the kind that anyone could bully. More importantly, the birth rate was rapidly decreasing. In this era where there was no way to guarantee one's own life, only powerful and powerful people would be willing to have children. Even if ordinary people had children, they could not afford to raise them or even give birth to them. If it went on like this, perhaps human beings would slowly become extinct, just like the dinosaurs during the Ice Age. Then, many years later, other creatures would be born on Earth, just like how we look at the dinosaur fossils of the past. They would find things left behind by humans, and call them antiques and relics. What are you thinking? Yin Hanqing's voice was a little low, but it was exceptionally steady. He sat beside Xiaoqing, which woke Xiaoqing from her thoughts. Xiao looked up and saw that Yin Pingshan and the others had already prepared things. I am thinking whether human beings will become extinct. After Xiaoqing finished speaking, she laughed to herself. Now that I think about it, even if it goes extinct, it will be a long time in the future. After I die, who cares about the flood? No, it won't. Yan Hanqing did not feel that this topic was strange at all, and said seriously, human beings are different from those extinct species. When they are in a desperate situation, human beings will use all their strength and even burst out more strength to survive. Even if we become extinct, like you said, it will be a long time after we die. I rarely hear you say such a long sentence. Xiaoqing could not help but laugh. She called the little bun over and held him in her arms, and then the possessive Air Dai hugged Xiaoqing from behind. Chapter 109. Yan Hanqing's eyes darkened. I'm not good with words, but there are always exceptions. For example, when facing the person he liked. Xiaoqing hugged Xiaobao and Xiaobao carried the rabbit. Leaning back, she was in Air Dai's arms. She looked at the sky lazily, and then asked herself, will the apocalypse end one day? Yan Hanqing thought for a moment, then said, they will. I heard that some bases have already started to develop antidotes to resist the zombie virus. If this continues, they might be able to develop antidotes to turn zombies back into humans. I hope so. Xiaoqing stretched her body. When she stretched her body, she leaned on Air Dai. Air Dai was rubbed by her, and his entire zombie body was aroused. However, a certain key part of his body became a decoration after that day. The most painful thing for a man was to have a beautiful woman in his arms, but not have the ability to sleep with her. It was the same for male zombies. If the apocalypse ends, I want to buy a house near the sea. I like the feeling of facing the sea. My whole body seems to be relaxed with the widening of my horizons. I want to send Bao Bao to the best kindergarten. If Air Dai can be cured, that would be the best. I can help him find his family and send him back to them. Xiaoqing murmured in Air Dai's arms. She smiled as she talked. That was the life she wanted but couldn't have. Yan Hanqing opened his mouth, but in the end, he couldn't say those two words. What about me? Xiaoqing probably didn't think about his place. After all, he was an adult. No matter what, he didn't need others to worry about him. At least he wouldn't starve to death. I'm thinking too much. Xiaoqing rubbed her head and said to Yan Hanqing, let's pack up and prepare. When we reach that city, we may face a lot of dangers. Yan Hanqing nodded. His feelings for Xiaoqing had deepened as he got along with her day by day, but he had never had the urge to say it out loud. Yan Hanqing felt that he didn't have that qualification. Moreover, Air Dai was lucky enough to get Xiaoqing's approval first. He just wanted to be her solid shield and help her build a stable back. Then, when she was fighting in the front, she could trust him with her back. Or let him be her shield. No matter what, to use a cliché phrase from a TV series, it was fine as long as she was happy. On the other side, Gu Panpan was scolding Gu Chuan, brother, can't you say more? Will you die if you say more? Gu Chuan squatted on the ground to pack up. He was silent. Unlike Yan Hanqing was clumsy and didn't want to talk. After listening to Gu Pompon's complaints, Gu Chuan didn't say anything. He did what he should do and was very calm. Gu Panpan was infuriated. She looked at Xiaoqing's side and said resentfully, just keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself. Don't tell anyone what you're thinking. Just watch as Sister Qing runs off with another man. Then cry under the covers. Gu Chuan refuted seriously, I won't cry. I will only bless her. Gu Panpan was so angry that she laughed. She kept saying that Gu Chuan was useless. Although she and Gu Chuan were not twins, they were born from the same mother. After living together for so many years, how could she not see through Gu Chuan's thoughts? Gu Chuan had a good impression of Xiaoqing, and it was getting better every day. Gu Panpan saw it. More importantly, Gu Panpan also liked Xiaoqing. If it was another woman who became her sister-in-law, Gu Panpan might be picky. But if it was Xiaoqing, she would only cheer. It was a pity that this brother of hers was a taciturn gourd. He kept everything in his heart and never said anything. He never tried to curry favor with her. How could he get a girl like this? Thinking back, Gu Chuan was very handsome and was very popular in school. Although he was an iceberg with a poker face, there were always some girls who could withstand the cold air. They were conquered by his appearance and pursued him. Later, they were all chased away by him. Gu Panpan couldn't help but roll her eyes and say, "Just keep it to yourself. You are destined to be alone." Gu Chuan didn't care about what Gu Panpan said. He was a person who wasn't good at expressing his feelings. In addition, he didn't like to talk. It was normal that he couldn't get a girl to like him. As for Xiaoqing, Gu Chuan never let Gu Panpan know. He didn't express it not because he was shy or anything else, but because he was afraid. It was like a person who knew that he would definitely be rejected, so he would rather maintain the current relationship. It was better to go from being friends to being in an awkward relationship. Gu Panpan said that he was a person with a strong heart. But in front of Xiaoqing, he was so cowardly. Chapter 110. Before entering the city, Xiaoqing had told the girls not to get out of the car no matter what happened. Xiaoqing was the weakest one among them, except for Little Bun, so Xiaotong had arranged for Xiaotong to protect them. When everything was ready, they entered the city. The situation in the city was better than they had imagined. Many zombies wandered out of the city to look for food, and some wandered around the edge of the city. After entering the city, they didn't encounter as many zombies as they had imagined. Several people with fire and earth power stood on the roof of the car to clear the way and clear the zombies blocking the way. Some evolved zombies were very fierce. They directly jumped on the car, but were bounced off by the protective cover of the people with water powers. Of course, there were also some particularly fierce ones. They almost jumped on one of the people with superpowers. Xiaoqing reacted quickly. She shot out a vine, wrapped it around the zombie's leg and pulled it back. That zombie took advantage of the chaos and ran away among the other zombies. Zombies were getting smarter and smarter. If they continued to develop like this, it was absolutely not impossible for them to have the same intelligence as ordinary people. In the beginning, those zombies were slow and weak. As long as ordinary people had a weapon in their hands, even if it was a wooden stick, they could kill a lot of zombies. Now the zombies' body toughness, movement speed, and attack power had all increased a lot. This trip is particularly easy. Yan Pingshan stuck his head out of the window and said to Xiaoqing with a smile, "I thought we would have to fight a hard battle before we could leave, but looking at the current situation, it will be a lot easier for us." Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She looked at the few zombies on the street and felt a little uneasy. She always felt that there was a pair of eyes in the dark watching them. Those eyes were full of malice, which made her feel scared. After a moment of silence, Xiaoqing asked Dai, "Do you feel the breath of your own kind?" Xiaoqing was not a complete zombie, but Dai was. He could sense many things that Xiaoqing could not. For example, he could sense powerful zombies within a certain range. After Xiaoqing asked, Dai began to sense his surroundings seriously. After a long time, he nodded and shook his head. Then, he looked at Xiaoqing in confusion. Xiaoqing could roughly understand what he was trying to say. Dai wanted to express that he could sense that there were many of his kind around, and there was also a powerful force that belonged to his kind. However, that force was vague and could not be sensed clearly. Sometimes it would even disappear. That was why Dai was unsure. Xiaoqing vaguely felt the danger. She couldn't help but remind Yan Pingshan, "Don't relax. I always feel that something is wrong." Yan Pingshan frowned. The situation was too smooth, which made him feel a little uneasy. So he called Mengshen. Mengshen's ability was completely different from Xiaotong's. He was good at detection and crisis sensing. Mengshen's body was very weak. Even if he awakened his ability, he was not as good as some ordinary people. Because he was in the research institute all year round, radiation, overwork, and overuse of his spirit, his physical fitness was particularly poor. Even using his ability would bring him a lot of burden. So, even if he had the ability, Mengshen rarely used it. Only when he was researching, he would use his spirit to assist. After listening to Yan Pingshan's words, Mengshen carefully used his spirit to sense the surroundings. He found that there were zombies around, but there were very few zombies on the road they were traveling on. Chapter 111. He could only sense that there were still a lot of zombies nearby, but he didn't find anything else. After telling Yan Pingshan about this discovery, Mengshen thought for a moment, got out of the car and went to find Xiaoqing. When Xiaoqing was hesitating, Mengshen came over. Xiaoqing let Mengshen get in the car. What's the matter? Mengshen told her about his discovery and then asked, "Did you find anything? Since you reminded me, I vaguely feel that something is wrong. I just feel a little uneasy in my heart." Xiaoqing thought for a moment. Air dye couldn't be exposed, so she said lightly, "I always feel that there is something secretly spying on us. Let's go a little further, we are almost a quarter of the way there." Mengshen gritted his teeth and said, "When we came here there was no big danger, only one time when we passed by a shopping mall. The people below were greedy, so they went in to search for supplies, but they encountered a lot of zombies. Some people were injured, so this time we will take a detour. There shouldn't be any big danger." "Okay," Xiaoqing responded, but her heart was heavy. Her sixth sense had always been very accurate, and it was also her sixth sense that saved her many times. The more they went forward, the more danger Xiaoqing felt. The degree of danger even made her want to take her people back, even if she had to give up this mission, even if they were not far from the destination. This kind of impulse was slowly fermenting in Xiaoqing's heart, and in the end it was out of control, and became impossible to suppress. But even to this extent, Xiaoqing didn't choose to leave. She knew that as long as she said something, Gu Panpan and the others would support her without asking for any reason, and leave with her, even if the hardships along the way would be in vain. What about Mengshen and the others? Mengshen and Yan Ruru's team was different from Xiaoqing's team. In Xiaoqing's team, it could be said that Xiaoqing had the final say. From Yan Hanqing to Gu Chuan and his sister, they all had full trust in her, not to mention Air Dai and the others. As for Yan Ruru's team, they did not have the final say. Such an important decision could not be made in a few minutes. Not to mention whether Xiaoqing's proposal would be approved. Even if they could agree to Xiaoqing's proposal and leave the city, they would have wasted enough time. But Xiaoqing had no other choice. She could only look for Yan Pingshen and Yan Ruru to tell them her thoughts and decision. Yan Ruru was stunned. "We can leave this city in one more day. My suggestion is to leave." Xiaoqing didn't say much. Yan Ruru frowned and said, "With the time we have to leave, we can definitely pass through this city." Yan Pingshen thought more than Yan Ruru. "First, we don't know if there is any danger in passing through this city. So far, we only know that you can sense it. We can't use this reason to convince everyone. If I give the order now and tell my people to leave this city and take a detour, 99% of them will definitely oppose it. Second, Qing, you should also know that many people in our teams have misunderstood you. As long as you make the suggestion, some people might do it on purpose. So let's talk about the result." Xiaoqing said indifferently. She seemed to not care about anything. Even her expression was always a faint smile, a faint anger, or an expressionless face. Many people would think that she was cold and unapproachable, and then retreat. However, Yan Pingshen knew that Xiaoqing had her unique iron-blooded gentleness. It was just that this gentleness was only for people she approved of. For outsiders, she was iron-blooded. Chapter 112. Perhaps they had already been drawn into the approved circle, which was why Xiaoqing had the patience to hate him until now. Yan Pingshen gritted his teeth and said, "But I believe you. I will bring up this suggestion and see what they say." Mengshen nodded. "I will try to persuade them." Yan Ruru paced back and forth and finally gritted his teeth. "I can only try. I can't guarantee that I can persuade them." Xiaoqing's heart was actually quite warm. After all, they were willing to trust her and make such a decision without any evidence to prove that there would be fatal danger ahead. This showed that she wasn't a failure as a person. It was time for lunch break. Yan Pingshen and Yan Ruru gathered their subordinates and told them about the matter. As expected, everyone was surprised by this decision. Why do we suddenly want to go back? Just because someone sensed danger? Where is there no danger in the apocalypse? Won't there be danger if we take a detour? I think we should speed up and go through this city. It will be safer. That's right. Just because of an inexplicable premonition, we have to retreat and take a detour. We have been walking for almost a day. Isn't it superfluous if we retreat and take a detour? I think so too. Where is there no danger? I feel danger all the time. Does that mean it's better for me to stay in the base and not go anywhere? Listening to the dispute below, Xiaoqing had a hunch that this would happen, so she was not disappointed. Yan Pingshan and others looked at Xiaoqing helplessly. Immediately someone whispered, "I was wondering who suggested it." So it was her. She is quite capable when facing her own people. Now that she feels danger, she wants to go back and take a detour? After that, many people secretly looked at Xiaoqing, afraid that she would suddenly kill people. Later, they found that Xiaoqing didn't mean that, so they became bolder and couldn't help but say, "That's right. I didn't see her do anything when she was killing her own people. Why is she scared now? If you want to take a detour, do it yourself." Their dissatisfaction was vented out as they whispered louder and louder. Xiaoqing didn't care. She just whispered to Yenruru, "Leave those women to me first. I'll take them away first. If anything happens with their physiques, I'm afraid they'll be the first to." Yenruru hesitated for a moment before asking, "Are you leaving?" Xiaoqing nodded and looked at Gu Panpan and the others with a very gentle gaze. "I don't want anything to happen to my friends, so I don't want to take them with me anymore. I will send them out of this city and find a safe place to settle down first. Then I will come back to catch up with you until you pass through this city. Then I will go back and take them to the Zhongbei survivor base to settle down these girls before returning to S City." Yan Pingshan was the first to disagree. Chapter 113. Okay, I will be back. Xiaoqing and Yan Pingshan exchanged the serial number of the signal transmitter. "Call me if you need anything." This signal transmitter was developed after Doomsday. It was very similar to a mobile phone. The only difference was that it was powered by a crystal nucleus instead of electricity. Moreover, it had a range. There was a signal tower in the base. Only within the range of the signal tower could it be used. Also, it could only send text messages and could not receive voice messages. After explaining a little, Xiaoqing said goodbye to Yenruru and left with the girls. Gu Panpan and the others didn't even ask why. They were all angry when those people snickered. "Who are those people?" "Sister Qing, you shouldn't have reminded them," Gu Panpan said angrily with her eyes wide open. "Okay, let's hurry up. I remember there's a bank on the edge of the city. The security there is pretty good. I'll put you guys down there and then go back to help Meng Shan." Xiaoqing stepped on the gas pedal and sped all the way. Occasionally there were zombies in the way, but they were all sent flying. "What? Sister Qing, you still want to go back?" "No. Let's go back to the S City survivor base. Don't worry about them. They can do whatever they want." The more Gu Panpan spoke, the angrier she became. She really couldn't stand that group of people. From the beginning, when the girls were bullied and Xiaoqing punished the culprit, Gu Panpan already hated them when they were still gossiping. Why did the girls deserve to be bullied? Why did the weak deserve to be inferior to others? That bastard was a human life, but these girls weren't? They were all a group of bastards. Since we have accepted this mission, we must escort them to the end. Xiaoqing hit another zombie and sent it flying. Yan Hanqing, who was driving at the back, almost couldn't keep up with Xiaoqing. "You know my strength, so you don't have to worry. I'll come back after I escort them to their destination." After Xiaoqing finished speaking, Dai came out from the middle and hugged Xiaoqing's waist, expressing his determination to follow Xiaoqing no matter what. "There's still Dai, so we'll definitely be fine." Xiaoqing reached out a hand to touch Dai's head, comforting him, and then said, "Person must have a bottom line. If he didn't have a bottom line, he wouldn't even be qualified to be a human." Xiaoqing also had her own bottom line. Just like this time, even though she knew that she would encounter danger, she still went back and settled down her companions. She was not stupid, this was a kind of persistence. Gu Panpan wanted to say something, but under Xiaoqing's determined eyes, she couldn't say anything, because she also had her own persistence, so she could understand Xiaoqing. After a long time, Gu Panpan clenched her fist and said, "No matter what, you have to take care of your own safety. If you really encounter a big danger, then, as long as you come back safely, you don't have to care about too many people. Anyway, they are not good people. I know we will be a burden if we go with you, and we will make you worry. So we will wait for you outside." If you don't come out after a long time, we will go in and look for you. Xiaoqing nodded and agreed. Although Gu Panpan knew that Xiaoqing was comforting her, she still felt relieved. She leaned against the seat and muttered to herself, I'm still too weak. If she was strong enough, she would have a reason to follow Xiaoqing. No matter where they went, at least she wouldn't be a burden. She believed that her brother and Yin Hanqing also thought so. No one was willing to see Xiaoqing fight alone. If they were forced to accept it, they would feel very uncomfortable. Chapter 114. Xiaoqing's speed was very fast. Before the sun had even set, she had already brought her friends to their destination. It was still within the city limits, but it was a small bank in a relatively remote area. There were only 2 zombies in uniform in the bank, so they were easily cleaned up. Xiaoqing left all the food behind, and then told them to close the door and wait inside. Xiaoqing was forced to promise that she would use the signal transmitter to send back messages every day. If she didn't send back any message after a day, Yin Hanqing and the others would enter the city to find her. After they agreed, Xiaoqing took Air Dai, kissed Little Bun who insisted on following them, and returned to the city. She and Air Dai weren't worried about being attacked by zombies at night, and they had endless energy, so they directly walked at night. With their speed, if nothing unexpected happened, they should be able to catch up with Yin Pingshan and the others before noon tomorrow. On the other side, Yin Pingshan and Yin Ruru's subordinates were all cheering. They finally got rid of Xiaoqing, that demon. Although Xiaoqing said that she would come back, it didn't affect their good mood. There were even a lot of people secretly praying that Xiaoqing would die on the way back. In short, she wouldn't come back to torment them. Yin Pingshan was very helpless. He could make his subordinates listen to his orders, but he couldn't change their minds. Most people in this world are stupid just like them. Meng Shen coldly looked at those people. He had a good premonition, and the more he walked, the more he felt danger. If there was one person in this group who believed Xiaoqing's words the most, it was none other than him. So looking at this group of people, he felt very helpless. If you really encounter any danger, you should try to escape. You still have a wife, and she is waiting for you to come home. Also, I promised Uncle to take care of you. Meng Shen said softly. What nonsense are you talking about? Yin Pingshan's face was also a little ugly. He pursed his lips and said in a low voice, it'll be fine. Even if it's a little dangerous, it won't be a big problem. We'll definitely be able to return to the Zhongbei survivor base safely. Meng Shen didn't say anything more. He just lay in the car and closed his eyes to rest. He had to recharge his energy. If he really encountered danger, he might be able to protect Yin Pingshan. After all, Yin Pingshan's special ability was too weak. It was basically no different from having no special ability. Yin Pingshan was also a wit paranormal, but he was different from Xiaoqing. He was much weaker than Xiaoqing, especially when he was compared with her. After all, Xiaoqing's fighting ability was in everyone's eyes. As for Yin Pingshan, he could only make the seeds sprout. So usually, his special ability was used to help Meng Shen study how to make plants from other places grow in the Zhongbei survivor base. Then there was nothing. What was the use of making the seeds sprout? Was he going to use it to scare the zombies? Xiaoqing and Air Dai were running very fast. They almost didn't have time to rest, especially Xiaoqing who was driving. She unloaded everything in the car, so the car was even faster when empty. In addition, she drove very fast. If the person in the car wasn't Air Dai, he might have been scared to death by her driving. Xiaoqing was running so fast for a reason. She was really worried that Yin Pingshan and the others would encounter any danger. The more worried you were, the more likely it was to happen. When Xiaoqing was about to return to her previous location, she suddenly received a message from Yin Pingshan. It was only a few words, "Don't go back to the city." She replied to the message and didn't get an answer. The optimistic thought was that Yin Pingshan and the others had already left the city and arrived at the river safely. They were preparing to cross the river. The pessimistic thought was that Yin Pingshan and the others had encountered a fatal danger. They were worried that Xiaoqing would come back and be involved in danger, so they notified her. If it was the former, Xiaoqing replied to the message, they would definitely reply. However, there was no reply so far. It was very likely that it was the latter. Xiaoqing was a little anxious at that time. She tried to locate Yan Pingshan's location but failed. She immediately asked Air Dai, "Where are the most zombies now?" Air Dai was stunned and pointed in a direction. That was the direction he felt the strongest energy fluctuation. Xiaoqing stepped on the gas and rushed over. She hoped that Yan Pingshan and the others were still okay. It seemed that her premonition was very likely to be true. This city was indeed more dangerous than everyone thought. It seemed that there was something secretly controlling most of the zombies in the city. If it was true, Yan Pingshan and the others were afraid. Chapter 115. Falling from a high place, Yan Pingshan couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood. If it wasn't for Mengshan protecting him, he might have been torn to shreds by now. What he had to do now was to seek for help. But where would he go to find help? The Jiangbei survivor base was still some distance away from here. By the time he found help, Mengshan and the others might already be. Yan Pingshan didn't think of going to find Xiaoqing, but what would he do after finding her? Would he let Xiaoqing accompany him to die? Yan Pingshan tried his best to support his body and staggered forward. He regretted it. He should have persuaded everyone at that time. No, he should have been tougher at that time and listened to Xiaoqing. Even if someone opposed, he should have forcibly withdrawn. Then the current situation wouldn't have happened. Yan Pingshan was already trying his best, but even though he was limping forward, the zombies were as agile as monkeys. They quickly caught up with him. Yan Pingshan was in despair. He would probably be eaten by the zombies bite by bite. The people trapped there would also be eaten by the zombies because they couldn't hold on. Regret was completely useless. A zombie threw itself at Yan Pingshan and bit his neck. Yan Pingshan's eyes became fierce when he felt the sharp pain. He grabbed the dagger at his waist and stabbed it into the zombie's head through its eyes. Even so, the zombie didn't let go. Yan Pingshan pushed the zombie's body away. The piece of flesh that was bitten was immediately torn off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. He groaned and rolled forward to avoid another zombie. His eyes were filled with despair. Even if he died, he would drag a few zombies down with him. The other zombies that were chasing after them had also caught up. It was said that when humans were in danger, they would burst forth with abilities that exceeded their limits. Yan Pingshan had personally proven this point. His ability was useless, and he had relied purely on his weak physical strength to kill 2 zombies. However, he was already exhausted by this point. His body was covered in wounds left behind by the zombies. He lay on the ground, gasping for breath. He didn't even have the strength to move a finger. The remaining zombies all pounced on him, biting his flesh piece by piece. In addition to the pain, there was more despair. But at this time, Yan Pingshan vaguely heard a scream. Then, several green vines swept over like a whip. The few zombies that were lying on top of him were all swept away. Then a flexible figure fell from the sky. Its sharp claws easily tore apart a zombie that was chasing him. This figure was very fast. It's running like a phantom. Soon it cleaned up the few zombies chasing him. "Are you okay?" Xiaoqing parked the car beside Yan Pingshan. She got out of the car to check on Yan Pingshan's injuries. There were many scratches and bites on his body. Although they weren't fatal, they were bleeding, which was very troublesome. If the bleeding wasn't stopped in time and the wounds were bandaged, excessive bleeding could kill him. Moreover, the wounds that were bitten by zombies would be covered with corpse poison. Although paranormals wouldn't be infected by corpse poison, it would still make it difficult to stop the bleeding. Bear with it. Xiaoqing took out a dagger and stripped Yan Pingshan. Yan Pingshan was a little ashamed but more anxious. He grabbed Xiaoqing's hand and hurriedly said, Leave this city. There's a zombie here that we don't know its specific level. It can command the zombies in the whole city. Then it set a trap for everyone. Go before it finds out. Leave quickly." Chapter 116. Xiaoqing didn't pay attention to him. She just took the dagger and cut off the flesh near the deep wound. Yan Pingshan was in so much pain that he kept gasping. After cutting off the infected flesh, Xiaoqing took out the anti-inflammatory and hemostatic capsule. She opened it and sprinkled the powder on Yen Pingshen's wound. Yen Pingshen was in so much pain that he kept pinching Xiaoqing's wrist. When Xiaoqing finished bandaging him, he let go. Xiaoqing's wrist had a clear red 5-finger mark. "I'm sorry." Yen Pingshen's voice was hoarse with a deep apology. Xiaoqing didn't care. She just asked him, "You said you were surrounded? Where are they? Are they okay?" "A lot of people died," Yen Pingshen said in pain. In the end, a few brothers volunteered to cover the retreat. "We rushed out a bloody path. We are currently trapped in a building. Xiaoqing, let's go find reinforcements. Do you think this is realistic?" Xiaoqing helped him gather his clothes and said calmly. Yen Pingshen grabbed his hair in agony and growled in a low voice, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault. If I had been more resolute back then and ignored their objections and went back the way we came, things wouldn't have turned out this way," Xiaoqing said lightly. "It's not your fault. In that kind of situation, no one would give up on passing through the city and then go back the way they came. People are like this. Only when they suffer losses and suffer will they know that they can't just look at what's in front of them. Only then will they regret. If Yen Pingshen really chose to force them to go back the way they came, those people would definitely rebel." So from the beginning, Xiaoqing knew that her proposal would never pass. The reason why she brought it up was out of a sense of responsibility. Just like some things, you know that you will fail, but not doing it and not doing it are two different things. At least she had tried her best, so she had a clear conscience. Yen Pingshen was very ashamed, because he knew that what Xiaoqing said would happen. Seeing Yen Pingshen like this, Xiaoqing said, "I'll ask Dai to send you out. You go and find the reinforcements. Where are they? I'll go and see if I can delay them." Yen Pingshen already felt very guilty. How could he let Xiaoqing take the risk? He shook his head forcefully. "Let's go find reinforcements together. You can't go alone. The longer we delay, the more dangerous they will be. Are you sure you want to waste time with me?" Xiaoqing was not moved at all. He said coldly. Yen Pingshen gritted his teeth and pulled Xiaoqing. "I don't want anything to happen to Mengshen and the others, but you are also my friend. I don't want you to die. Tell me, where are they? If you don't tell me, they might really—" Xiaoqing was very determined. Yen Pingshen was about to collapse. He sat blankly for a second, then lowered his head and pointed in a direction. Chapter 117. Xiaoqing used Dai's blood to mark Yen Pingshen so that ordinary zombies would not attack him, and high-level zombies would also think thrice before acting, so Yen Pingshen's degree of safety was much higher. When doing all this, Xiaoqing did not hide it from Yen Pingshen, so Yen Pingshen immediately discovered it. He was stunned, pointing at Dai, speechless. Xiaoqing held his finger and said softly, "Forget everything you just saw. I treat you as a friend, and I don't want this matter to spread to other people's ears. If anyone knows that he is different from others, I will kill everyone who knows." Yen Pingshen was not angry because of the threat. Xiaoqing exposed this matter in front of him, which showed that Xiaoqing trusted him very much. At the same time, Yen Pingshen was clear about another thing, which was that Xiaoqing was extremely protective. If anyone knew that Dai was a zombie, Xiaoqing would really kill everyone who knew. "Don't worry, I am not the kind of person who bites the hand that feeds me." Yen Pingshen took a deep breath, and could not help but feel that something was wrong. When he thought that he had been with a zombie for such a long time, he admired himself, and of course he admired Xiaoqing even more. Yen Pingshen also imagined a lot of grudges, such as in the apocalypse, Xiaoqing lost her husband, Dai protected her all the way to escape, but was bitten by a zombie. The person she loved had died, and Xiaoqing did not want to lose the person who loved her, so she risked the world and secretly raised Dai, who had turned into a zombie. Who would have thought that Dai did not lose his mind, and so on. Before he could finish his imagination, he was already stuffed into the car. Xiaoqing took Dai and ran all the way to the place where Mengshen was trapped. The place where they were trapped was very obvious because there were too many zombies around, and the whole hospital was surrounded by zombies. Fortunately, Xiaoqing and Dai were not normal people, so it was easy for them to blend in. There were more zombies inside the hospital wandering around. Mengshen should be trapped on the top floor. and Xiaoqing took Air Dai and quietly went up. After reaching the top floor, Air Dai clung to the ceiling, and Xiaoqing hid in the shadows in the corner, secretly observing. Meng Shen and the others were on the balcony, the top floor balcony, and zombies could only go through that door to reach the top floor. As long as a zombie showed its head, it would be smashed into pieces by the overwhelming power. This was also the reason why the zombies below had not broken through the top floor yet. No wonder when they were still outside the building, Xiaoqing saw a group of zombies hanging outside like Spider-Man, desperately climbing to the top floor. It turned out that Meng Shen and the others were on the top floor. From Xiaoqing's angle, she could not see Meng Shen and the other's situation. After thinking, Xiaoqing told Air Dai not to act rashly, and then she went out of the building through the window. Meng Shen was leaning against the wall, resting. There was a wound on his handsome face, which was left by the zombie's claws. It was still bloody, and the flesh around the wound was exposed, which looked terrible. But he did not even have the strength to treat the wound, and sat there weakly. Just as he was resting, a vine suddenly wrapped around the railing next to him. Meng Shen's first reaction was that a zombie was about to climb up, but then he found that the vine was very familiar. He opened his eyes wide, and even could not help but reach out to touch the vine. Then the silly Meng Shen was stabbed by the vine's thorns, and then he was poisoned. As soon as Xiaoqing climbed up, she saw Meng Shen miserably lying there, moaning in pain. She quickly went forward, and then found that Meng Shen was poisoned by her. Chapter 118. Xiaoqing was speechless. Xiaoqing had no choice but to detoxify Meng Shen, and then helped him up. "Why are you here?" Meng Shen gasped violently, and then asked in disbelief. "Didn't I say that I would come back to find you?" Xiaoqing looked around. Originally they had 30 or 40 people, but now there were only a dozen left and all of them were injured. Yen Ruru was a little better than Meng Shen. She moved over and sighed. "Are you stupid? Why did you come back? To die?" Her eyes turned red as she spoke. Her relationship with Xiaoqing could only be said to be good. Before, she had some opinions about Xiaoqing's way of doing things because of her. Now she was full of gratitude and sadness. Xiaoqing came back this time. Wasn't it no different from dying? "I met Yin Pingshan on the way. Now he has called for reinforcements. As long as we hold on until the reinforcements come, we will be fine," Xiaoqing said softly. Everyone was silent. Everyone knew that if they waited until Yin Pingshan found the reinforcements and brought them here, they might all be dead. After a long time, Meng Shen said, "Is he okay?" Xiaoqing nodded. "He is a little injured, but it's not a big deal." Meng Shen pursed his lips and said to Xiaoqing, "I don't know how you avoided those zombies and came here. Now you should go back the way you came. We are the ones who dragged you down." Xiaoqing wanted to slap him, but she gave up. She sat down on the ground and said in a casual tone, "Fighting with zombies and your brain is out? Otherwise, how can you speak without thinking?" Meng Pingshan's eyes widened. He wanted to refute, but after a while, he lowered his head dispiritedly. "I'm serious. You should leave. From the very beginning, I approached you with bad intentions. Yin Pingshan too. We don't deserve this." Xiaoqing faintly nodded, then said, "I know, but I didn't come back because of this. It's just that I accepted this mission, so I have an obligation to ensure your safety. That's all, don't think too much about it." After Xiaoqing said that, Meng Shen looked at her, touched. "Qing, you don't have to say that. I know. Although you look cold on the surface, you are more affectionate and righteous than those who are kind to you. If we can get out of here alive, I will swear to be your sworn sister." "Who cares?" Xiaoqing didn't care about her image and rolled her eyes. She was very helpless. People were strange these days. No one would believe her if she told the truth. Since Xiaoqing came to the roof, those people couldn't help but lower their heads. They didn't dare to look at Xiaoqing because at the very beginning, Xiaoqing had suggested that they go back the way they came. They were greedy and wanted to speed up through the city, which led to the fatal disaster. 30 to 40 brothers, more than half of them died. The rest were struggling at death's door, hiding on the roof. They didn't know whether they would live or die in the next second. But there were also some people who complained in their hearts. Why didn't you persuade us more when you knew there was danger? If you had persuaded us more, maybe we would have gone back and not so many people would have died. Why didn't you tell us the reason? Why didn't you tell us what kind of danger was ahead? Why did you bring your companions back but not us? This was the deep-rooted bad habit of people. There were people like this who pushed all the mistakes to others. This kind of desperate situation also made some people crazy. There was a man who wasn't very tall, and he couldn't help but say, "If you have a way to leave, then take us away. Is it because we offended you before so you are like this? If you were willing to say more, willing to tell us about the danger ahead, we would definitely go back the way we came." Chapter 119. As soon as he spoke, Meng Shan's face darkened. The key point was that there was someone who agreed with him. He was so angry that he wanted to throw this person down and let him see what kind of danger Xiaoqing took to save them. How could he have the face to say something like that? More and more people began to have this kind of understanding. Yes, why didn't Xiaoqing tell them about the danger ahead? If she had told them, they would have definitely returned. Everyone chose to ignore it. At that time, they were the ones who encouraged everyone to speed up through the city. They also chose to ignore Yan Pingshan's words. Xiaoqing suggested to return because she had a premonition that there was an unknown danger ahead. What's more, even if Xiaoqing knew what kind of danger was ahead and told them, would they really believe it? No one thought about it. When they were in a desperate situation, their hearts were filled with negative emotions. They chose to vent all their negative emotions on Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing's eyes were very cold, and finally became very deep. At this moment she had made a decision. As long as Meng Shan, Yan Pingshan, and Yan Ruru reached the Zhongbei survivor base, this mission wouldn't be considered a failure, right? As for the others, what did it have to do with her? Therefore, in the face of this group of people who were destined to become corpses, Xiaoqing wasn't angry. It was stupid to be angry with dead people. Xiaoqing didn't lower herself to their level, but on the contrary, it encouraged their arrogance. More and more people began to complain, and the entire top floor was filled with complaints. Xiaoqing glanced through the guardrail. There were already many zombies climbing up, and some zombies fell down halfway and broke their bones. However, more zombies were slowly climbing up. Quiet! What time is it now? You are still like this. Touch your own conscience and ask yourself, who is the one who is wrong? Meng Shan stood up and said coldly. Those people instantly fell silent. Some of them began to reflect on themselves in shame, while some of them purely recalled Xiaoqing's combat prowess. I don't think we can stay on the top floor anymore. In the silence, Xiaoqing pointed downstairs and said. Everyone looked over and saw the group of zombies hanging on the windows. The zombies hanging outside the building were all evolved zombies. Their speed and jumping ability were very strong. They could easily jump up to a height of one floor, and then grab onto the anti-theft windows of the next floor. Just like that, they climbed up floor by floor. Fortunately, the zombies were relatively stupid. They wouldn't climb directly from the window of the top floor to the balcony like Xiaoqing. They would only climb up floor by floor, so they still had some time to react. We can beat them down, a paranormal suggested. And then, some of you will guard the door of the balcony, and some of you will guard the edge of the roof. Then you will wait for those zombies to use up your superpowers and be surrounded by them? Xiaoqing sneered. Then what do you think we should do? A paranormal was not convinced. Xiaoqing didn't care. She just said, I have an idea, but I can't guarantee that everyone can go out alive. It's very dangerous. I'll tell you and you can decide for yourself. Meng Shan nodded. Go ahead. I'll listen to you. Yan Ruru also said, yes, it's better to be dangerous than to wait for death here. My companion will come over. I'll ask him to create chaos in a while to attract most of the zombies' attention. Then we'll clean up those hanging outside the building and leave from the top floor with my vines, Xiaoqing said. This plan is very dangerous. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not. Meng Shan nodded at once. I'll go with you. Yan Ruru immediately supported her. I'll go with you too. But will your companion be in danger? Those who were still yelling that it was too dangerous to stay on the roof and wait for rescue stopped talking. Xiaoqing comforted Yan Ruru. Don't worry. He has a special ability. He can leave safely. That's good. Yenruru frowned and then said, tell him to be careful. The Zombie King has been hiding in the zombie crowd. It didn't show up even when it was chasing us. It's very insidious. Xiaoqing nodded and then asked, is there anyone who wants to leave? Chapter 120. Should they choose to take the risk or stay on the roof and wait for help? Humans had a common problem, that is, they would always comfort themselves. They would rather hide on the roof and wait for death, and comfort themselves that someone would come to rescue them, than take the risk. In the end, only Mengshen and Yenruru spoke. Whether we live or die, I am willing to take the risk with you. Hearing their words, the people who had made up their minds to wait on the roof began to waver. Xiaoqing did not care whether they wavered or not. She jumped up and squatted on the guardrail. Yenruru immediately understood and shot out small fireballs, shooting down the zombies hanging outside the building. When the zombies were almost cleared, Xiaoqing tied the vines to the guardrail and jumped down first. She first went to the window on the roof, and after telling Erdai her plan, she jumped out and hung outside the window, then grabbed the vines and flew down. After landing on the ground, Xiaoqing began to observe. After waiting for a while, the orderly zombies suddenly became chaotic and swarmed into the hospital building. When almost all the zombies had rushed in, Xiaoqing called Yenruru and the others on the roof. Mengshen was the first to come down, followed by Yenruru, and then a few people followed. Now run forward immediately, no matter what happens, don't stop, Xiaoqing said. I will go to help my companions. I will go with you. Mengshen just finished speaking, but he was dragged away by Yenruru. Do you want to be a burden? If you run faster, you will help Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing nodded, and then turned back into the building. The continuous howling of zombies made the gloomy hospital building even scarier. Xiaoqing went all the way to the roof, and saw Erdai and a little girl in a floral dress confronting each other. The little girl looked to be 12 or 13 years old, wearing a dirty floral dress. The dress was full of traces of dried blood, dust, and other dirty things. The little girl's eyes were especially big, and on her dry face, they looked even more terrifying. She grinned, and the dense sharp teeth were like saw teeth, shining with cold light. There was a wound on Erdai's face that was slowly healing, which should be left by this zombie. It should be the Zombie King that was hiding in the city. When the female zombie saw Xiaoqing rushing over, she let out a sharp howl. The surrounding zombies immediately surrounded them. Dummy also let out a howl. Those zombies began to wander back and forth as if they were hesitating. High-level zombies could control low-level zombies, but what if there were two high-level zombies giving out opposite orders at the same time? Xiaoqing landed beside Erdai, and looked at the Zombie King vigilantly. Its turbid eyes rolled twice, and then fixed its gaze on Xiaoqing. Without any warning, the zombie suddenly appeared in front of Xiaoqing, and its sharp claws and fangs attacked Xiaoqing's throat. Xiaoqing didn't expect it to come so fast, and her throat was almost torn apart. Fortunately, Erdai had seen the zombie's ability once, and timely blocked it. But even so, Xiaoqing's neck was still scratched with a not very deep wound, and Dumbo's arm was also scratched. She took a deep breath, and her eyes became cold and serious. The wound on Erdai's face was caused by this. The vines flew out from Xiaoqing's hand, and tried to bind the zombie. But the Zombie King's speed was very fast, and it left afterimages on the spot, as if it was teleporting, and dodged Xiaoqing's vines. Chapter 121. Erdai tried to catch up with it, but Erdai was not as fast as it. He was so angry that he was hopping on the spot. If that was the case, this zombie was not that scary. After all, speed was useless. Xiaoqing immediately knew why it was qualified to be a Zombie King. Just as Xiaoqing was controlling the vines and trying to catch the Zombie King, a black crack suddenly appeared beside her. The Zombie King really teleported to her side. At that moment, Xiaoqing could not move. She could only watch the Zombie King's black nails piercing into her stomach. Erdai quickly rushed over. The Zombie King's arm twisted around Xiaoqing's stomach and was about to leave. Xiaoqing finally regained her ability to move. She grabbed the zombie king's arm so that it could not leave her stomach. She used her other hand to hit the zombie king's face. Air Dai also went to the zombie king's back and hit its spine hard. The zombie king roared and disappeared in front of Xiaoqing. Air Dai's attack also missed. He hurriedly went to support Xiaoqing. He panicked and reached out to cover the wound on Xiaoqing's stomach. Xiaoqing grabbed Air Dai's shoulder and staggered to the mailbox window. Before the zombie king could react, they broke the window and jumped down. The height of 10 floors was enough to kill all zombies. However, the zombie king jumped down directly. When Xiaoqing fell halfway, she began to shoot out vines to hook the anti-theft window to slow down the fall. When she was close to the ground, she suddenly waved out a bunch of vines and hit the ground. The rebound made her want to vomit blood. However, the two of them successfully landed on the ground. The zombie king did not use any power to slow down the fall. When it was about to reach the ground, it disappeared in the air. When it reappeared, it was already beside Xiaoqing and Air Dai. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth. A vine combined into a thick whip and hit the zombie king's head. When it was about to move, countless thin dots suddenly drilled out of its body. Xiaoqing took advantage of the moment when it was stiff and hit the zombie king away. Then they ran forward without hesitation. As they ran, Xiaoqing controlled the vines to cover their backs. The zombie king kept roaring behind them, encouraging the zombies in the city to besiege Xiaoqing and Air Dai. In the end, it found that with Air Dai there, the zombies did not dare to surround them. It then gave up and kept flashing, chasing Xiaoqing and Air Dai. Lead it to an empty place in front. Xiaoqing's pain was very low, but there was a big hole in her stomach. She frowned because of the pain. Go to the front. Don't hold back. Let's leave it here forever. The reason why they didn't dare to make a move in the building was because Xiaoqing knew that even if the two of them could kill the zombie, it would definitely end with both of them suffering heavy injuries. The surrounding zombies would definitely not be merciful to them after they were seriously injured. When they reached a place where there were fewer zombies, the two of them could try their best to kill the zombie. Then they could find an empty house to hide in and heal their wounds. The idea was good, but the reality was cruel. Xiaoqing and Air Dai just ran to an empty space when they saw Yenruru and Air Dai rushing over. Yenruru said anxiously, "Xiaoqing, we are here to help you. Are you hurt?" Fuck his mother. With Yenru and the others here, Dummy absolutely could not enter the state of madness and expose the fact that he was a zombie. She also could not use the part of the ability as a zombie, so her fighting power was greatly reduced. It would be wishful thinking to keep this zombie alive. Chapter 122. Let's go. Why did you come back? Xiaoqing gritted her teeth. Mengshun wanted to pull Xiaoqing back, but Air Dai slapped his hand away. He pulled back his hand and said, "We were worried about you. The zombie king is catching up with us. Let's go." Xiaoqing didn't have time to scold them. She pulled Air Dai and started running. The zombie king had caught up with them. It flashed and appeared beside them. One of them didn't have time to react. The zombie king clawed at his face. Its sharp black nails pierced into his eyes and cheekbones, crushing his head. Yenru set up a wall of fire and wanted to force her way through. Then she was dragged away by Mengshun. The group of people fled frantically. From time to time, those who fell behind were easily killed by the zombie king. Neither the earth shield nor the wind shield could withstand the zombie king's claw. It would only stop for a short while when it was killing people. That moment was the only time they could escape. Soon only Yenruru, Mengshun, and Xiaoqing were left. Xiaoqing clenched her teeth and said, "We can't run anymore. If we keep running like this, we will be killed one by one. What should we do?" Mengshun gasped and asked in a low voice, "Fight with it. But we are no match for it. When we fight later, we should try to get out of the city. When we get to the river, it won't chase us anymore." Xiaoqing said in a low voice, "You're right. It's too humiliating to run like this. Let's give it a try," Yenruru said fiercely. They briefly discussed the plan. Xiaoqing originally wanted to be the bait, but although she covered the wound on her stomach, Mengshun could still see that she was powerless. Thus, the three of them immediately rejected the idea. In the end, Mengshen became the bait. Mengshen deliberately fell behind, and the Zombie King was tricked. Seeing Mengshen fall behind, the Zombie King flashed to Mengshan's side. At this moment, Mengshen suddenly glared at the Zombie King, just like the stare of Medusa in the myths. The Zombie King suddenly paused for a moment, and then Shaoqing detonated the daughter again, temporarily immobilizing the Zombie King's body. Mengshen rolled forward and was picked up by Dummy. The place where the Zombie King was, however, was engulfed by a huge fireball. Is it dead? Yenruru gasped heavily, and then asked expectantly. She knew that the zombie wouldn't die so easily, but Yenruru couldn't help but imagine. The fireball dispersed, revealing the Zombie King's pitch-black body. Its clothes were all burned away, and its skin and flesh were charred black. Only a pair of large eyes remained. When it turned, most of the whites of its eyes could be seen. It looked very scary. Air dye landed from the sky and kicked the Zombie King's neck. With a cracking sound, the Zombie King was kicked away again. However, no one dared to attack it while it was weak because they all knew that it was at least a level 5 Zombie King. That kind of attack wouldn't be fatal to it. On the contrary, if they rushed forward, they might be seriously injured or even therefore, after tricking the Zombie King, Shaoqing immediately took her friends and ran as fast as they could. They ran even faster than rabbits. Every time the Zombie King was about to catch up with them, they would set up a plan. They would let one of them be the bait and then trick the Zombie King. Just like that, they ran for an entire afternoon. Everyone was exhausted and on the verge of collapse. The Zombie King was also much smarter. It wandered behind them and no longer took the initiative to approach, like a cat playing with a mouse. Chapter 123. We're about to leave the city. Shaoqing comforted Mengshen and Yenruru. She and Air Dai were doing better than Mengshen and the others. After all, they were not living people, so their stamina was naturally better than Mengshen and the others. Mengshen and Yenruru had truly reached their limits. This was especially true for Mengshen. His leg had been injured when he was acting as bait. Thus, he was also the one who had exhausted the most physical strength among all of them. The closer they got to the edge of the city, the more irritable the zombie became. It was originally following behind them leisurely, but now it had started to try to kill them many times. Once they left the city, Yin Jiang would be right in front of them. After they entered the water, the zombie would definitely not take the initiative to follow them. We'll be safe soon. Shaoqing encouraged them. Hold on for a little longer. Mengshen's breathing was like an old bellows that was constantly being pulled. It sounded very painful. He was supported by Air Dai and Yenruru on both sides. His left leg dragged on the ground, and large drops of cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Why don't you put me down? Mengshen said in a low voice. I have a way to delay it for a little while. You guys hurry up and run. Shut up. Yenruru glared at him and dragged him forward with great effort. Shaoqing's superpower was exhausted again. She didn't care about the negative effects of swallowing crystals on her body. She grabbed a handful of crystals and swallowed them into her stomach. The crystals were quickly absorbed by her body. The sudden burst of power made a trace of thick black blood drip from the corner of her mouth. Shaoqing quickly wiped away the blood and released the vines behind her. Look! Yenruru suddenly opened her eyes wide and pointed not far away. It's Yinjiang. They had unconsciously run out of the city and were now very close to Yinjiang. Yenruru was so happy that she almost jumped up. She couldn't help but speed up. They saw hope, but the Zombie King began to go crazy. It roared and no longer lingered at the back. It suddenly pounced on them. Shaoqing was at the back of the group and was directly pounced on. She rolled with the zombie and shouted, I have a way to get out of here. You guys run first. Once we reach Yinjiang, we will be safe. Go. Mengshen looked back and roared hysterically. He ran towards Yinjiang, who was only a few hundred meters away. Shaoqing stabbed her arm into the zombie's chest. The zombie stabbed her stomach again. The woman and the zombie rolled on the ground. Drops of almost black blood were spilled. This kind of thick and dark blood was unique to zombies. It was very rare. However, as the woman and the zombie fought, The blood spilled all over the ground. Xiaoqing was a little dizzy. She could feel that her organs were rupturing. Then, with her high recovery ability, they slowly recovered. However, her physical strength and superpower couldn't keep up. Xiaoqing tightly restrained the Zombie King and didn't let it attack Air Dai and the others. At this time, Air Dai and the others were infinitely close to Yanjiang. The Zombie King roared and tore Xiaoqing's abdomen with its claws. Xiaoqing didn't let go. She bit the Zombie King's throat like a crazy person. The rotten meat had a fishy smell. Thick zombie blood flowed down her throat and into her mouth. That kind of smell made her want to vomit even though she had a weak sense of taste. The Zombie King was also roaring crazily. Its claws scratched Xiaoqing's back until it was a bloody mess. Xiaoqing's vision was getting blurry. She hugged the Zombie King tightly and looked at Air Dai. Air Dai seemed to be trying to run back. She wanted to shout, "Don't come back." Go. Yanruru pulled Air Dai, but Air Dai shook him off. He quickly ran over. His pale face was full of panic. He was afraid of losing her, even if he didn't know what death was. The Zombie King suddenly disappeared from Xiaoqing's arms. Xiaoqing fell to the ground powerlessly. She looked at the Zombie King that appeared out of thin air not far in front of her and pounced on Dummy. She wanted to get up, but she didn't have the strength. She even had an illusion that if she moved, her organs would flow out from the big hole on her stomach. However, Air Dai was no match for the Zombie King. Xiaoqing watched Air Dai being hit, and the Zombie King running in the direction where Air Dai landed. Yanruru, who was about to reach the river, suddenly pushed Mengshan forward and turned back to save Air Dai. They were a bunch of idiots. Extremely stupid. Xiaoqing closed her eyes. She seemed to feel that the corners of her eyes were wet. Didn't they say that zombies didn't have tears? She used her arms to support herself and got up from the ground. She staggered a step and knelt on the ground again. Perhaps in the eyes of Gu Panpan and the others, she was an invincible existence. No matter what kind of difficulty or danger she faced, she could handle it. But the fact was, she was just a person who was slightly stronger than ordinary people. Now, she couldn't even save the person she wanted to save. Air Dai was even more desperate. He didn't know what death was. He only knew that he had to save Xiaoqing. Even if he was hit easily, the first thing he did when he got up was to run in the direction of Xiaoqing. Yanruru hugged Air Dai with tears in her eyes and dragged him in the direction of Yanjiang. They were just a few steps away from the river. Then they would be safe. However, the Zombie King had already rushed over. At the critical moment, Air Dai suddenly pushed Yanruru and pushed Yanruru into the river. Then he turned around and rushed towards the Zombie King. He roared towards the sky. His beautiful eyes were quickly dyed red. Then his long nails and bulging muscles appeared. In this state, Air Dai and the Zombie King collided at high speed. Air Dai was sent flying again. The sound of his bones breaking was clear and terrifying. Air Dai was limp on the ground. His red eyes looked at Xiaoqing reluctantly. The best memory he had was of her holding his hand and trimming his nails bit by bit. Her hands didn't have any warmth, but he felt warm. It was as if his heart was touched. He wanted to keep that warmth forever. Just as Air Dai gave up struggling, he saw a heavily injured figure hug the Zombie King. In the next second, countless vines wrapped around the two figures and suddenly tightened. The sound of bones breaking was heard continuously. In the end, the green figure fell into the river. It only poked its head out for a moment before it was washed away by the river. Dummy roared at the top of his lungs. Half of the bones in his body were already broken. He couldn't get up at all. He tried his best to wriggle in Yanjiang's direction. He roared again and again. Finally, he shouted hoarsely and vaguely, "Qing." If Xiaoqing heard him, she would definitely hug him tightly. Air Dai used the last of his strength to jump forward and fell into the river. He really didn't want to lose that kind of warmth. It was said that people who were often treated violently when they were young had a great chance of becoming abusers, and also a great chance of becoming masochists. He was the latter. Yin Qiuyue was an orphan who stayed in an orphanage for a long time. Because of his unsociable personality, he was bullied a lot. Later he was adopted. His adoptive parents weren't good people. His adoptive father often vented his anger on him, and his adoptive mother would also pinch his inner thigh when she was angry. The skin on his inner thigh was almost never intact. Later, his adoptive mother ran away with someone else. His adoptive father would get drunk every day and beat him when he was drunk. Sometimes he would use his fist, sometimes he would use a wine bottle. When he was angry, he would even break a chair on Yan Qiue's back. Chapter 125. Bodyguard D. What's the point of talking so much? Do you have the guts to save that girl? If you don't, just follow us. Don't let Yan Qiue hear what we're talking about. In fact, Yan Qiue heard everything. He glanced behind them, then put his chin on Shaoqing's shoulder and said, "Baby, listen to what they're saying." Shaoqing looked at him and felt that he was cute. She couldn't help but stroke his head. Yan Qiue immediately rubbed his head against Shaoqing's palm. He narrowed his eyes and looked very obedient. The group of bodyguards behind them were shocked. Was the man in front of them really Yan Qiue, the devil? Was he really not replaced by someone else? Or maybe he was possessed by some strange thing. However, they didn't dare to talk about it anymore. Who knew if Yan Qiue would get angry? It was said that Yan Qiue had a nanny at the beginning, who was arranged by Qiao Mo. However, one night for some reason the nanny annoyed Yan Qiue. Or she saw something she shouldn't have. It was said that when Yan Qiue threw the nanny out of the door, her body was broken into pieces and couldn't be picked up. They could only sweep it into a pile and shovel it away. Although they were all elites in the base, if they really angered Yan Qiue and got killed, no one would stand up for them. In fact, Qiao Mo might even kill the person who angered Yan Qiue first as an apology to her. Because Yan Qiue was too important, every paranormal in the base was equipped with a kind of medicine. After taking it, their strength would be greatly improved temporarily, but it could only last for an hour. After that, they would be weak for a day. However, this medicine was simply a life-saving treasure when they were in danger. Since this medicine was invented, the death rate of the entire base during missions had been greatly reduced. This medicine was invented by Yan Qiue. The people in the base jokingly called it the invincible little pill. If they couldn't take it, they would activate the invincible pill. Therefore, for the base, Yan Qiue was more precious than a panda. No one dared to do anything to Yan Qiue. However, Yan Qiue was very arrogant. There were many people who didn't like him. Yan Qiue took Shaoqing to walk around the garden. He couldn't help but pick up a few flowers and weave a ring for Shaoqing. His fingers were flexible, so the ring he weaved was very beautiful. He put it on Shaoqing's finger. Although it was made of flowers and plants, it was very unique. Among the men that Shaoqing had met, the one who clung to her the most was Dai. Dai was ignorant and didn't know how to please her at all. Therefore, Shaoqing felt that it was quite novel and let Yan Qiue put it on for her. The two of them walked around for a while more. Then Qiao Mo found someone to call Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue frowned. He was very unhappy to be disturbed. However, he and Qiao Mo were partners, so he could not give him face. He reluctantly grabbed Shaoqing's hand and said, "Wife, sit here for a while. I'll be back soon." He walked away, looking back repeatedly. He left 2 bodyguards to protect Shaoqing. In order to prevent others from discovering that Shaoqing was different from others, he specially instructed the bodyguards to not let anyone near Shaoqing. After Yan Qiue left, Shaoqing sat on a stone bench and twirled the ring on her finger in boredom. Ever since she was injured, she was especially sleepy. She would sleep for more than half of the day. Moreover, she didn't want to get up if she didn't have to. After sitting for a short while, Shaoqing felt a little sleepy. She supported her face with one hand and held a small white flower in her other hand. She lazily looked at the layers of white flowers not far away. This kind of flower was called a bamboo joint because its stem was like a bamboo. It was jointed, and the flower at the top had 6 petals. The flower was very small. Even in the cold winter, even on the peak of a snowy mountain, it would still bloom as usual. Chapter 126. That was why this flower was also called hope. Xiaoqing looked at the sea of flowers, but she was thinking about Air Dai and the others. The zombie king had fallen into the water with her. Without the zombie king in the city, the zombies would definitely be defeated. No zombies would chase after Air Dai and the others. In addition, Yan Hanqing and the others had been waiting for Xiaoqing for a long time. They would definitely go into the city to search for her. They would be able to help Air Dai and the others. Therefore Air Dai would definitely be fine. She was only afraid that Air Dai, that stubborn person, would jump into the river with her. With Air Dai's temper, the possibility of that happening was very high. If Air Dai also jumped into the river, who knew where he would be swept to? It would be very difficult to find him. Xiaoqing was not worried about Air Dai's safety. He was a zombie like her. As long as his head was not injured, no matter how serious the injury was, it would heal one day. If he just jumped into the river, he would definitely be fine. Perhaps she should go to Zhongbei Survivor Base. Perhaps after Air Dai woke up, he would go to Zhongbei Survivor Base or go back to S-City Survivor Base. If Air Dai could not be found in either of these places, then Xiaoqing could only look for Air Dai everywhere. Just as Xiaoqing was in a daze, a few people approached her. However, they were stopped by the bodyguards. Did the two of you eat a leopard's guts? How dare you stop me? Do you believe that I won't beat you to death? The girl who walked over looked like she was in her 20s. Although she was good-looking, she was dressed very unconventionally. There were also a few bodyguards following beside her. Bodyguard A did not intend to move aside. He said honestly, when Master Yen left, he said that no one is allowed to come close. Miss, even if you want to kill us, we can't let you come close. The girl was furious. She slapped Bodyguard A directly. Who do you think you are? How dare you stop me? Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you? Scram. Bodyguard A frowned slightly. No matter what, he was still a level 3 metahuman. How could he be humiliated like this? Even if the girl was Qiao Mo's sister, it was still too much. Qiao Yu didn't think that she had gone overboard. Her brother was the most powerful person in the base. In the past, he was equivalent to the president of a country. She was the sister of the leader of the base, who had the right to stop her from doing whatever she wanted. Even if there was, it shouldn't be these two people. They were just a few bodyguards. To put it bluntly, they were dogs that Qiao Mo had given to Yan Qiyue. She could hit them if she wanted to. Did she have to report to him if she wanted to hit a dog? Bodyguard B silently stepped forward and blocked Qiao Yu's path. Their intentions were obvious. They didn't want her to go over. Charles' tone was deadly. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at Bodyguard A. Do you really think I'm joking? The atmosphere immediately became tense. If Qiao Yu wanted to shoot, the two bodyguards definitely wouldn't sit still. They were only hired by Qiao Mo. It wasn't as if they had sold their lives to him. Even if a fight broke out, Qiao Mo wouldn't do anything as long as they didn't go overboard. After all, Qiao Yu was the one who started it. Qiao Yu had the temper of a rich young lady, but Qiao Mo didn't. If Qiao Mo punished them for this, he would definitely lose a lot of people's hearts. Therefore, the two bodyguards weren't worried about a fight breaking out. When Xiaoqing heard the quarrel, she raised her head slightly and looked over. Xiaoqing's appearance was very outstanding. Even her cold aura only added to her brilliance and made people feel that she couldn't be blasphemed. Qiao Yu had a grudge against Yan Qiyue. This time she deliberately came to pick a fight when she heard that Yan Qiyue had brought back a girl she liked. The moment she saw Xiaoqing, Qiao Yu's originally angry mood was mixed with jealousy. Even Xiaoqing's cold aura became fake arrogance in her eyes. Chapter 127. Thus, the flames of war that were about to die down reignited in an instant. Qiao Yu seemed to be shooting at Bodyguard A, but the bullet was actually aimed at Xiaoqing. Bodyguard A was shocked and quickly formed a windshield to block the bullet. It didn't matter if he was injured or if he offended Qiao Yu, but he couldn't let Xiaoqing get hurt. If Xiaoqing got hurt, Yan Qiyue would definitely skin them alive when she returned. What are you guys still watching for? Go! Xiao Yu stomped her foot and the bodyguards around her swarmed forward. "Miss, sorry for the offense." The two bodyguards gritted their teeth and started fighting with the bodyguards. After all, the other party had the advantage in numbers. Although the two of them were temporarily tied with the bodyguards, they didn't have the time to take care of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing didn't care about the situation on the other side. Instead, she plucked a yellow chrysanthemum flower and tore it petal by petal. As she tore, she muttered in her heart, "Zhongbei Survivor Base, S-City Survivor Base." When Xiao Yu saw that Xiaoqing was ignoring her, her temper exploded. She shot at Xiaoqing, but the two bodyguards couldn't stop her. Xiaoqing frowned slightly. She stretched out her hand and a ball of green light enveloped her palm. Then she easily caught the bullet as if she was picking up a melon seed. "You go over and grab her." Xiao Yu ordered the bodyguard beside her. Immediately, one of the bodyguards left the group and walked towards Xiaoqing. He was quite ruthless. He probably thought that Xiao Yu didn't like Xiaoqing and wanted to show off in front of her. He deliberately reached out his hand to grab Xiaoqing's shoulders. This way, he could dislocate the joints on Xiaoqing's arms if he exerted some force. Xiaoqing looked at him expressionlessly. She was now a level 4 paranormal and had just swallowed a level 5 zombie core. Although most of the core's energy was used to repair her body, the remaining energy was enough for her to advance from a beginner to an intermediate level, for paranormal. This man had just broken through to the peak of level 2, and his realm wasn't stable yet. How dare he try to capture her? Xiaoqing narrowed her eyes. Her eyes were bloodthirsty. She stretched out her hand, and green vines rose into the air, forming a green cage and trapping the man in the middle. He still tried to struggle, but a layer of flames appeared on the surface of his body. Then the cage slowly tightened. It was not afraid of the layer of flames on the surface of his body at all, and firmly bound him. Furthermore, the vines continued to tighten, cutting into the surface of his skin. The sharp thorns pierced into his flesh, and traces of blood flowed out. If it weren't for Xiaoqing controlling the vines and not injecting the poison into his body, he would have turned into a puddle of liquid by now. Xiao Yu's eyes widened. Xiaoqing could control a level 2 paranormal in a second, which meant that she was at least a level 3 paranormal. Although the paranormal had underestimated Xiaoqing, he was very close to level 3. Xiaoqing glanced at Xiao Yu and curled her lips. She had already injected somewhat energy into the paranormal's body with the vines. Although it was only a small amount, the energy quickly entered the man's brain through his meridians and attached itself to the alien energy in his brain. Xiaoqing had imitated the daughter and planted a seed in the man's alien energy. As long as he tried to break through to level 3, the seed would grow rapidly and destroy the alien energy crystal. She was still experimenting with this trick, so she wasn't sure if it would work. "Let him go." Xiao stomped her feet. The guards her brother had given her were all useless. They couldn't even do anything to Xiaoqing. Chapter 128. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She waved her hand, and the vines binding the man turned into a whip. She held it in her hand and swung it forcefully, causing the man to roll a few times before landing at Xiao Yu's feet. Xiao Yu kicked the scarred man. Trash. She knew that she couldn't do anything to Xiaoqing today, but she was still unwilling to give up. She said, "Of all the people you could cling to, you had to cling to that pervert Yan Qiue. You're really despicable. I want to know what kind of seductive tricks you used to charm that pervert into bringing you home. Why don't you show me a live performance? Why don't you show me a live performance?" Yan Qiue's cheeks were slightly red from running, and he was still a little out of breath. After he finished talking to Qiao Mo, he ran over. He didn't expect to hear Qiao Yu humiliating Xiaoqing as soon as he arrived. The anger in his heart immediately ignited, and he couldn't wait to tear Qiao Yu into pieces. The two bodyguards immediately retreated and stood on either side of Yan Qiue. When Xiao Yu saw Yan Qiue, a trace of fear flashed through her eyes. Then she quickly raised her head. "Yan Qiue, don't think that you can be lawless just because you've gained my brother's trust." "Oh." Yan Qiue's lips curled into a faint smile with a trace of bloodthirstiness. He took 2 steps forward and Xiao Yu immediately took a step back. Then she felt that she seemed a little cowardly, so she immediately braced herself and took another step forward. At this time, Yin Qiuyue was already in front of her. A few bodyguards immediately surrounded Xiao Yu, afraid that Yin Qiuyue would make a move. Yin Qiuyue made a move, but it wasn't towards Xiao Yu. Instead, it was towards one of the bodyguards beside her. Yin Qiuyue only stretched out his hand and clenched his fist. Then he saw the bodyguard beside Xiao Yu explode. Blood and minced meat splattered all over Xiao Yu. She was stunned. After all, Xiao Mo had protected her very well. Even during the apocalypse, she had never seen such a bloody scene. The other guards also took a step back in fright. Xiao Yu's legs went soft all of a sudden. Her nose was filled with the thick smell of blood, and her face and body were covered with minced meat. The strong smell made her hold her stomach and vomit. Xiao Yu, I'm not doing anything to you because you're Xiao Mo's younger sister. I'm giving Xiao Mo some face. However, if you cross my bottom line, I'll still make a move against you. At worst, I'll just change bases. As long as I say the word, there are countless bases willing to welcome me back. So don't provoke me. Yin Qiuyue squatted down and smiled at Xiao Yu. Because of the fluctuation of his emotions, the mole appeared at the corner of his eye again. It was like a drop of bright red blood, extremely enchanting and charming. Even though there was a pool of blood under his feet, Yin Qiuyue was still calm. He rubbed Xiao Yu's head, then suddenly pressed the back of her head, pressing her face into the minced meat on the ground. His voice carried a faint killing intent. What's more, you're provoking my wife. This is the first time, and I hope it'll be the last time. Xiao Yu was sprawled on the ground. Her mouth and nose were filled with minced meat and blood, mixed with her vomit. Xiao Yu was dumbfounded. She had never suffered so much in her life. Although she was angry, she was more afraid than anything else. She could feel the killing intent emitted from Yin Qiuyue. When he said he wanted to kill her, he really wanted to kill her. Xiao Qing stepped forward and pulled Yin Qiuyue back. It wasn't that she pitied Xiao Yu, but that she couldn't suppress her bloodthirsty impulses. Yin Qiuyue looked at Xiao Qing with concern. You're not hurt, right? Xiao Qing pulled him back. Yin Qiuyue glanced at Xiao Yu and waved to the 4 bodyguards. Then, he was dragged away by Xiao Qing. Chapter 129. Xiao Qing couldn't stand it anymore. She stepped forward and pulled up his pants. Yin Qiuyue, who had a serious look on her face a second ago, turned shy in the next second. She even looked gentle. Xiao Qing felt that Yin Qiuyue would definitely become a pervert if she stayed with him for a while longer. How to subdue a pervert? The answer was, be more perverted than him. Xiao Qing originally wanted to leave Yin Qiuyue alone and let him think about his life and future. Then Yin Qiuyue's stomach hurt again. It was probably caused by his irregular diet in the past. His stomach hurt every 2 or 3 days, and if it got worse, he would have gastric bleeding. Yin Qiuyue's face was pale. He curled himself up like a prawn. Sweat kept dripping from his forehead, and his long eyelashes, which were like butterfly wings, trembled slightly. He looked pitiful. Xiao Qing sighed secretly and pressed Yin Qiuyue into her arms. Her hands were cold, so she had no choice but to use Yin Qiuyue's hands to rub his lower abdomen. She had already considered finding a doctor to check him. According to common sense, the body of an ordinary paranormal shouldn't be so weak. However, Yin Qiuyue had been torturing himself all year round and didn't care about his body. As a result, he became like this. After rubbing for a while, Yin Qiuyue looked much better. Xiao Qing was about to boil a bowl of soup for his stomach. He should feel better after drinking a bowl of hot soup. She was just about to get up when Yin Qiuyue hugged her tightly. Don't go. Hold me for a while. Xiao Qing's body was cold and lifeless, but Yin Qiuyue liked her hug. He felt cherished and cared about. Even if his body was cold, his heart was warm. Xiao Qing sat back helplessly and looked at the man in her arms. Yin Qiuyue was probably afraid that she would leave, so he hugged her tightly and buried his face in her lower abdomen. Yin Qiuyue's appearance was very beautiful. Probably because he had been in the research room all year round, His skin was exceptionally white, and it was easy to leave marks on it. Because of the pain, he looked a little fragile, and his facial features were much softer. Xiaoqing unconsciously looked at him for a long time. If it was in the past, Xiaoqing would never have believed that she would actually get used to being pestered by a pervert, sleep with a pervert, and finally think that a pervert was very cute. Then she accompanied him to become a pervert. When Yin Qiue fell asleep, Xiaoqing went downstairs and prepared to cook some soup for Yin Qiue. When she came downstairs, she saw a man sitting on the sofa. Unlike Yin Qiue's flamboyant beauty, this man was outstanding and handsome, but his eyes were full of playfulness. Xiaoqing acted as if she didn't see him and went straight to the kitchen. Xiao Mo was stunned for a moment, and the playfulness in his eyes turned into interest. Originally, he just wanted to see what kind of woman could conquer Yin Qiue, such a monster, and endure Yin Qiue's temper. Then he realized that Xiaoqing was more interesting than he had imagined. When Xiaoqing finished cooking a pot of chicken soup and brought it out, Xiao Mo was still sitting there. Xiaoqing acted as if she didn't see him and walked upstairs while thinking about what soup to cook next. Xiao Mo couldn't help but call out to her from behind, "Yin Qiue's wife, can you at least pay attention to me?" Xiaoqing frowned slightly and pointed to her throat before going upstairs. Xiao Mo raised his brows. He wasn't angry or frustrated. He leaned back and waited patiently. Xiaoqing went upstairs. Yin Qiue was lying in bed in a daze. He woke up after sleeping for a while, and the empty space beside him made him feel insecure. Chapter 130. While he was in a daze, Xiaoqing came over with a bowl of steaming hot soup. Yin Qiue immediately beamed with joy. "Baby, did you make this soup especially for me?" Xiaoqing answered softly. She hadn't spoken for a long time, so her voice was a little hoarse. Yin Qiue was stunned when he heard it. If it were any other person, they would definitely feel that they were deceived by Xiaoqing, but Yin Qiue didn't think so. He thought that Xiaoqing didn't hide it from him because she treated him as one of her own. With this thought, Yin Qiue felt much better. He couldn't help but move forward. "Baby, can you feed me?" Xiaoqing couldn't help but have blue veins pop on her forehead. She gritted her teeth. Seeing that this pervert was uncomfortable, she endured it. Xiaoqing's face stiffened, while Yin Qiue's face was flushed with success. He finished a bowl of soup. When Yin Qiue finished the soup, Xiaoqing said concisely, "Someone came downstairs." Yin Qiue immediately knew who had come. He snorted coldly and pulled Xiaoqing along, saying, "Let's go. I'll go get an explanation for you." It's time for him to discipline his arrogant and despotic younger sister. When Yin Qiue pulled Xiaoqing downstairs, Xiao Mo looked up and saw that Yin Qiue was wearing a simple white shirt. There was a beautiful whip mark at the collar, which looked especially erotic. His face immediately stiffened. Then he realized that Yin Qiue didn't have any intention of hiding it. He openly held Xiaoqing's hand and sat down. "What are you doing here?" Yin Qiue leaned against Xiaoqing like a little bird, which made Xiao Mo's face stiffen again. He hesitated for a long time before saying, "Congratulations." He knew a little about Yin Qiue's special fetishes. At first, he sent a nanny over. In name it was a nanny, but in reality, Xiao Mo meant that the nanny could take care of Yin Qiue and warm his bed. In the end, he didn't expect that the nanny had other thoughts. She climbed into Yin Qiue's bed in the middle of the night and saw something she shouldn't have seen. Yin Qiue immediately tore her into pieces. When Xiao Mo heard the news, he saw Yin Qiue leaning against the door. His collar was open and there were spots of wounds. As for the nanny, she had been reduced to pieces of flesh on the ground. Xiao Mo had never imagined that there would actually be someone who could tame this evildoer. Such a wanton and flamboyant person in front of Xiaoqing was as obedient as a kitten. Thus Xiao Mo looked at Xiaoqing with a probing gaze. Yin Qiue immediately blocked Xiao Mo's gaze without leaving a trace. The corner of Xiao Mo's mouth twitched. She was jealous of this? "Why are you here? Hurry up and say what you want to say and get lost." Yin Qiue looked at Xiao Mo coldly. He dared to look at his wife so many times. Did he have any ulterior motives? I'm actually here to apologize. Xiao Mo was silent for a moment before saying. His sister, Xiao Yu, was a little arrogant. Xiao Mo knew this very well. He wasn't the kind of person who would side with his family regardless of right or wrong. Moreover, Yan Qiue's value was extraordinary. He didn't want to fall out with Yan Qiue at all. Yan Qiue didn't say anything. Xiao Mo was slightly stunned. I thought you would react. Yan Qiue said lazily, didn't you want to apologize? I'm waiting for you to apologize. Most people would be polite and let the matter pass, but not Yan Qiue. Xiao Mo knew his temper very well. He sighed and said, Xiao Yu has a bad temper. I've told her many times, but she won't change. This time she offended your wife. I've already scolded her when I got back. How about we let this matter pass? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.